community, as it's understood. And we actually met through what we're doing today. He had me on his podcast to talk about the clowns originally about a year ago. Yeah, so I just hopped on quickly. He's on holiday right now, isn't he, in Florida? Which is why, obviously, you were with him. And yeah, he just he reached out, and I said, "Yeah, I'm free, man. I'll jump on your show. Why not?" So there we go. That's what happened there.
It's real.
The last minute thing, but yeah, it was good. It's good fun.
That's awesome. It's really interesting that the research I've been getting into recently has been leading me closer and closer to your body of work. And I'd heard of you before a year or two ago, and didn't get, as deep as I should have. It's through fast food and a couple secret societies headquartered in Florida that I really got down the clown rabbit hole again. Stumbled back into your stuff. And when we were going live talking about it, everyone was saying, Paul Staub's Understanding Conspiracy. Everyone's telling me you got to hook up with Paul Staub's. I was like, okay, let's make it happen. And almost the same time frame, a little bit after, JT comes into town. And it's almost, I can't help but feel like both of you just kind of like lightning bolted down and, in front of me almost at the same time.
So serendipitous, we'll call it. Very odd timing. Yeah. It's a small conspiracy world, to be honest, though, when you're in this game. Everyone starts to know everyone eventually once you've been doing it long enough. So it was only a matter of time before our paths crossed, I feel. And it's just a coincidence that, again, Joe and this all happened all at once. I thought I was laughing with Joe about it myself because I thought it was really funny when he told me he was meeting up with you. I was like, are you joking me? I've just messaged the guy like a day ago. So,
joking?
Well, it's something like that. Yeah.
Joking. Yeah. Well, dude, that's awesome. We're honored to have you, of course. We're real keen on getting some of your books here at the bookstore.
Oh, good. I just got a batch in, actually. Yeah. This
is where I work at.
It's a nice looking store.
We got a section that yours is gonna fit in with.
Perfect. I just literally got 7 hardcovers and about 6 paperbacks into my house for signed copies. So I'll put a few aside for you, and I'll send a couple of paperbacks and a hardcover in or something. Just give me your address, and I'll ship it straight out.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Okay, we'll get on that. Well, since we're talking about it, and since people are looking at it, Paul, you're the author of The Nephilim Looked Like Clowns.
Yes.
And you're largely, from what I've gathered, kind of, dare I say, like the originator or someone who really kind of built on that theory. How would you like to introduce yourself? Because that's all I know about you so far is, Nephilim, the clown theory, little Satan's little season, of course, as JT was telling me. How did you get into this, and how would you like to introduce yourself?
Right. Well, it's to be fair, because of the whole little season community thing, I've kind of been out of the Nephilim Look Like Clown podcast circuit game for a while. But recently, everyone's asking me to come back and do it again. So I don't know what's happened. There's some kind of resurgence or interest in, I suppose, spiritual warfare, demonology, Nephilim history, and obviously my work is a bit more of a niche, eye-catching hook type of thing. It's very odd sounding, so I understand. I don't know what it sounds like, is what I'm trying to say here. So I've kind of had this spiel I've been trying to master in the past to try and condense down to maybe like 20 minutes, which is basically just the story of how this even happened. So I came from an art background. I have an art degree in fine art. I'm not religious. I wasn't raised religious, should I say. My grandma was a Catholic, but very loose. Nothing of major happened in my life. I would say my family was a-religious, so I wasn't like raised in the church or anything. I don't speak Christianese. I don't sound like a typical Christian by anyone's standards today because I don't know the rules of engagement because I wasn't raised in that kind of environment. But growing up, I was always an artist, always creative, always kind of pattern recognition type of guy, seeing big picture things and looking at the details and drawing and painting and the rest of it, and music as well. So I've just always had that kind of brain, I suppose, but that led me to go through like quite an atheistic, scientific, logistical type of analytic, philosophical bent through my edgy teenage years, you know, and then coming up out of that, I kind of went more into the Gnostic, hermetics type of psychedelic exploration type of realm. I wouldn't call myself a new ager. I was never really like into like woo-woo crystal power, orgone energy type of chakra alignment stuff, but I was more into the Jungian archetypes, exploring consciousness to understand symbolism and what it is to have a conscious, and I went more into the Eastern Taoist type of Eastern view of things, you know, and I was playing around with a lot of those concepts while exploring psychedelics to try and understand myself, God, creation, and what it even means to be alive, and the general things you do from, you know, your early 20s onwards, that kind of region of your life where you're trying to figure it all out. And again, I was doing my degree in fine art while going through that whole time of my life, that period. And I saw some things that I can't really deny. I realized there's obviously some kind of tangible spirit dimension to this reality that we don't often perceive with our senses on a daily basis. It seems to be limited away from our sense perception unless we open the doorways, brute force them through these entheogen chemicals, you know. So that was a bit of an eye-opener from somebody who came from like an atheistic, non-religious type of background. When I had my first experience with salvia at 16, that kind of set me on a journey, you know, because kind of like, what was that? What am I supposed to do with what I just saw there? You know, I need to figure what that is out, and that was what set me off on questioning things and getting into the more philosophical, spiritual side of reality. And Christianity was just a back burner thing. It was just something I never even considered for 1 second as important or anything worth going near. You know, it was just not anything for me. No, it wasn't a thing. But as time went on, you know, I went to university, started this fine art degree, and looking for subject matters about things to make artwork about. I was very much focused more on the sacred geometry stuff, you know, and the mathematical geometrical principles within nature type of stuff, you know, and trying to play with the flower of life and the mandalas and trying to create these images and playing with these concepts of self. But then it was around 2012 and the end of the world Mayan calendar thing kind of kicked in. And I was hearing loads of people online telling me the world's going to end. And I was like, what the hell are they talking about? Like, what have these people seen or read or heard that's making them think this is going to happen? The curiosity gripped me. It's like, I've got to know. I've got to see what this is all about. And that was my nexus point, I suppose, that sucked me into the conspiracy world. And I've never really come out of it ever since, because it was one rabbit hole after another after that point. And the 2012 pole reversal Mayan calendar thing was a bunch of bunk at the end of the day. It was just the resetting of the calendar. It didn't mean anything in a grander sense, you know what I mean? It wasn't that the world was going to end, but that was kind of what set me off on the conspiracy tangent. And that's when things started to change in terms of my understanding of reality and perspective, because no matter what path I went down to try and understand the conspiracy, be it psychological or quasi-Gnostic spiritualism or something like this, I was never getting satisfactory answers from them. More questions, more pontificating rather than anything solid. And I kept bumping into the Christian angle to explain the conspiracy, but I just didn't want to go there. I was like, no, this can be explained in other ways. They cannot have anything of value to offer me type of attitude, you know. But my life tangibly was getting worse during this time of doing these drugs regularly and trying to explore and understand myself. I realized, you know, I wasn't a good person in hindsight during this time. I think I was quite, even though I thought I was killing my ego, you know, and becoming some kind of God within my own right, you know, and having these philosophies like, well, we're all just God collectively, you know, that have separated our consciousness into many vessels to experience what it is to not be God, those type of ideas, you know. But I was a bad person. I'd say I was a hedonistic, out for myself type of person, you know, an egotistical maniac. But I didn't see it that way from my perspective. But the interactions I was having with people was giving me the feedback that, no, Paul, there's a problem. And I kind of realize, you know, when everyone in the room's calling you a dick, you're probably a dick. You need to accept that, you know. It's not like you're all wrong type of situation, you know. But like I said, my life was kind of tangibly getting worse. I wasn't getting answers. I was getting further and further away from sanity, essentially, and losing grip with who I am, what it is to exist, and kind of getting lost in that realm of philosophy you kind of end up in when you're in that kind of community, shall we say. And then it got to a point where, you know, I kept hearing Christian preachers tell me the gospel. just on YouTube videos. Derek Prince was kind of like a huge one for me that introduced me to the concept of spiritual warfare as well. And that was something I didn't fully understand at the time, the spiritual warfare aspect, but it's something I was learning a lot about for some reason. And at the same time, learning about the conspiracy, the symbolism everywhere, the Luciferian agenda, the just basically how the world is corrupt as hell, and there's secret societies out there playing an agenda against us, which is terrifying. So that alone was also messing with my mind, also while trying to square consciousness itself, which is, I think, a nigh an impossible task for any human to basically do. And I got to this point where I just broke down. Like, I didn't know what I was doing anymore, basically. The conspiracy had overwhelmed me. I had found no answers through the psychedelic routes or through the Eastern philosophy routes. I understood very much how the creation works, but I didn't understand the creator, and I knew I was missing something. So I kind of got to this moment where I was at what we call a stag do in the UK, which I suppose is like a bachelor party in America. It's the same thing. And it was for my brother-in-law now,
Right.
who married my sister. And I remember I went to this party, in a different city away from anywhere, with a group of people, staying in a hotel. And the hotel had a bath. Now, I know this doesn't sound like much to anybody else, but to me, this was a big deal because I hadn't had a bath since I was maybe like in my early teens or a child, because I'd only ever lived in a building that had a shower cubicle. I hadn't actually had I'd just been showering for like 15 years, and I couldn't even remember physically last time I ever even touched a bath. But there was one of them. I thought I'll run a bath, And I kind of had this moment, like I said, I was at the end of my degree. I had this YouTube channel. I had no answers. I didn't know what was going on with myself. I had no direction in life. And I was kind of all burnt out emotionally and synaptically from all this experimentation. And I mean, I was going hard here. Name a chemical, I probably was doing it regularly. It's one of those type of things. And I basically just got down and said, okay, God, if you're real, if it's you, if this is what it's all about, show me. I've got nothing left. Like, show me what's going on. If it's true, I'm yours. Just do whatever. Like, last ditch effort, And then I got in a bath. And then immediately, bam, I had this feeling in my chest. I thought I was having a panic attack. I kind of leaped out of the bath, went to the mirror, panting, having this rush, this electrical feeling right here that I was like, I had to try and breathe it away, But it wasn't like painful. It was just overwhelming. It just came out of nowhere, shocking, shall I say. And then from that day, things did dramatically change in my life in a very tangible, incredible, supernatural way that I scarcely understand now still just how real it was. It's odd. So from this day onwards, things changed drastically for me. And I mean that in a real way. Like I quit cannabis about a year later, but it took me time to wean off it. And I realized the conviction was on me from then on. I've been doing this for 5 joints a day for 8 years type of stuff. You know what I mean? And it was like, now every time I did it, it's like, what are you doing? There was this conviction I just never felt before. Like, I didn't enjoy it anymore. It was gone, and I could see all the issues that I used to laugh and joke away. The cost, the loss of sense of self, the loss of perception of time it's given me over the 8 years. There's a lot of things which I laugh and joke as positives in the past but were clearly negatives now. It was holding me back. It was in control of me. I was no longer in control of it type of stuff, And that's not to disparage anybody who does that kind of thing. I'm not against it as a useful medicine tool or anything like that. If I support it, it's better than pharmaceuticals, don't get me wrong, But for me, I was clearly abusing it. It was a bad thing for me in that moment. I don't think it was helping me anymore. It served its purpose. So I kind of quit that. Then I quit smoking. Don't really drink anymore. Haven't touched a psychedelic since that time or anything of the sorts, And things, I just got a tangible change in my life. I can't explain. I'm a different person. I think I know what being born again actually means now. It's a real phenomena. It's not like just some platitude. It's kind of, and I didn't expect any of this. I wasn't raised a Christian. But it was kind of getting these evidences kind of proving to me that, yes, there's something here in this Christian realm. And that started my studies, really. I got serious about it. It's like, okay, so I'm going to read the Gospels. I'm going to go through the Old Testament. I'm going to understand spiritual warfare, demonology. If these people who rule the world believe in the devil, I better get to understand what this character is and what is going on here exactly, and where do demons come from. And there was, at the time, it's like the golden age of conspiracy, like the 2014-16 period. There were some big players in the game then, that were preaching some amazing things about the Nephilim, and this conspiratorial view, this Christian contrarian view on conspiracy and the Bible. Throwing the Sons of Seth theory out the window and saying, nope, angels were having sex with women and creating monsters. It's quite simple, And that got me, that explained a lot for me. As like someone who just couldn't get to grips with the Christian story because of all the issues that are glaringly there. The Nephilim answered a lot of problems that I had for myself personally. And so I studied that quite hard, and I really got into the biblical history angle through authors like Gary Wayne as well, who wrote the Genesis 6 Conspiracy. And he... I pretty much agree with his idea on where it all comes from, what the biblical history narrative is. I think he's hit the nail on the head quite well. And he was a huge inspiration for this book, actually. He gets a thanks at the end because he gave me some good advice on publishing a book, because I interviewed him a few times. And, I think he's bang on. So I kind of do a quick abridged version of a lot of his theories in this book as well, to kind of point people in his direction if they were interested in kind of understanding biblical history from a Christian contrarian view. But something never quite sat right with me. I'm an artist, I'm a visual guy. And I kept listening to these people, discuss the Nephilim. And every presentation you saw, they always look like Conan the Barbarian, but really, really big, and hench, with like a loincloth on and something like that, or like a club or something. And it's kind of, I don't think they would have looked as human as we've kind of imagined giants to look. I really don't imagine that's what the case would be, simply because of what came together to create them. We're talking about seraphim, angels, the Watchers, which are like a fiery flying dragon creature of some kind, mixing with human women, which, if you read, we'll get into it, seems like the daughters of Cain, who may have had extremely white, chalky, leprous skin, as a mark of some kind. You mix those two things together and you don't get something that looks human. If you mix a dragon and a human together, you get a monster of forms. And I think that's where my imagination was sparked, and I really started to think about that concept of what would Nephilim really have looked like, realistically. The OG Nephilim, the first ones. The ones we would call the Titans in many ways, the ones that were as tall as mountains in that respect as well. I think humans too simple of an answer. So as somebody who'd already explored things like psychedelics and these concepts, I always bumped up into this idea that there's DMT jesters. Quite a common, popular concept, Joe Rogan kind of popularized it on his podcast, and I think anyone who's done dimethyltryptamine can know that, there's these odd-looking creatures over there of many forms and sizes, but jester is a very common one that keeps cropping up over and over again. And the DMT realm has kind of been described as like a cosmic circus of some kind, and you've got like Terence McKenna's descriptions of self-dribbling machine elf basketballs everywhere and all this type of stuff, but it's kind of, it's very circus-esque, is what I'm trying to say here. And I always knew that as well. And I was learning that the Nephilim are the disembodied spirits of the giant. Like demons are the disembodied spirits of Nephilim, which are these giants that were around. So from Holy Christian angle, it's kind of, well, if there's a spirit realm and creatures are trapped there without a body as a consequence of they never should have existed to begin with. They were like a corruption of God's original creation. They don't have a soul or a nefesh, as it's said, that can leave the earth. It can't leave this realm and go anywhere, whether that's Sheol, to a waiting cell where humans go, or to the heavenly realms where the angels are. This creature can't leave in death. It's kind of stuck here on earth. So though disembodied, it still lives on the earth in spirit form. And then
real quick, have you done DMT?
Oh yeah, a few times. Yeah.
How good is this? Is it anything like this?
This depiction? It's close, but no human drawing or painting could ever. AI does a way better job these days. I'll tell you that much. But I remember seeing all these old drawings back in the day. They've got the sacred geometry there and the macabre in the center as well, and all the other things. But it's something akin to this. Yeah, you see these wide, grinning, bulging-eyed, crazy spider leg-like hair creatures. They are there and. Again, going to this kind of this story here. I saw them myself. The time did come, which really set me off on this theory. Like, okay, there's something there. This is real. This really is the case. Because I'd done DMT a few times and nothing. I never really encountered any creatures. Maybe I was being protected in some way, but I saw the realm and explored the realm, but nothing ever interacted with me when I was actively doing the things, and seeking them in a way. And thank God that was the case in hindsight. But it's only when I quit all of these things and gave myself to God and made a promise to him, okay, I'll do whatever you need me to do as long as you show me what the truth is, and it's kind of, that's when I started to get spiritually attacked myself. This is when I, for the first time, was actually getting evidence, tangible, visual, experiential evidence that demons are real. I didn't believe any of that until it actually happens to me, and it's always the case. You don't believe it until it happens to you, But I started getting sleep paralysis on a regular basis, seeing shadow creatures in my room and entities, shadow spiders as well, like as I was paralyzed, coming towards my body, wrenching myself awake, screaming in the middle of the night. Real, tangible, horrible nightmares on a regular basis of being chased and brutalized and murdered and killed and all these type of things. Things that had never come to me before. You never been. Go ahead,
I've smoked that strain before.
Yeah, but I quit by this point, and I was clean. I was clean.
Just
so
teasing.
It was odd, because I heard you dream again when you quit cannabis, but this was ridiculous. This was really ridiculous. And it's something else happened as well where I basically passed out I was in my parents' house, dog sitting of all things because they were away, and I just kind of watching TV and I just collapsed. I just went paralyzed and went to the side and I couldn't move. My eyes were wide open, but then darkness started to kind of creep in from the edges, and the room kind of, if you've done DMT, you know what this is. It's like the mandala thing where it kind of crunches into a vortex of some kind. And you kind of, if I could feel myself being pulled into it, and it's kind of the room became the vortex through all its geometrical forms. It's a very odd experience. You kind of have to have seen it to understand what I'm on about. But those who have seen this Jungian mandala, which is quite a common motif, you'll know what I mean. But I was kind of going into that, and I thought basically in that moment, I thought I was dying. I was pretty sure I was dying, like maybe having a brain aneurysm or something. I don't know what was going on, but paralyzed, vision going into some other realm, can feel my soul being pulled out of my body. And I didn't know what to do, so I just said, Jesus, help me. That's all I could do. I whispered it barely without moving my lips, you know what I mean? And it stopped instantly. Bam, back in the room, sit up, covered in sweat. Dog's there, just looking at me like, what happened? And I'm like, okay, that was nuts. Like I just internalized it and just didn't talk about it for a long time. Because it's like, what do I do with that? What am I supposed to do with that, But that was my first experiential evidence that there's power in the name of Jesus Christ against some kind of malevolent spiritual force that wants to kill us in some way, And again, I wouldn't have believed it, and I won't be telling you if it hadn't have happened to me personally. And it's kind of, that's it. So these experiences kept happening, and at the same time I'm studying biblical history. It's all kind of coalescing at the same time. I had this understanding about the Nephilim and where they come from, and then what happened to their spirits when they died as a punishment. They were wiped out before the flood, it turns out. A lot of people think the flood wiped them out, but they were forced to kill each other in horrible battles as a punishment for the Watchers who had to watch their children kill each other. It was kind of for creating them to begin with. So these things were like monstrous, angry, pissed off entities who hated us, basically, for many reasons, and they're stuck in this odd realm, and the common motif is jesters, and again, I had all this swimming for years, didn't know what to do with any of it at the time. No connections had been made realistically. And then I had another experience where I was walking down the streets, or I was doing something innocuous again. I might have been in the office at a call center at work. I really don't remember the time or setting. I just remember the vision. But suddenly, I was just flooded with. I was in the DMT realm. It's what you would call a flashback, if you know what that is in the DMT universe. You suddenly just go back there for no reason, and you can't control it. You cannot control it. And yeah, I was back in the DMT realm. I recognized it immediately. I felt it immediately, like I'm in that place again. I was having a psychedelic experience. I was losing my dissolution of body, But at this time, I was confronted by what's on the screen, basically. But mine was black and white lined. It had skin, which was like a corn snake, a black and white corn snake is all I can describe it. And it was
Wow.
it was enormous, and it had a purple lips, very similar to that. And I was just looking up at this thing, and it was kind of like one with the wall it was within as well. It was like melded in and out of the scene. You know, it wasn't like as tangible as a human body as we would have, but its skin was that color. It wasn't wearing like a jester costume or something. It wasn't, and its head was that shape. It wasn't wearing like a jester's horned cap or something. Its skull is shaped like that. It was a terrifying thing to behold. Just 10 seconds, I'm looking up at this thing, and then I'm back. And again, what the hell do you do with that? You know, but it was confirming a lot of things for me, you know. And then 2016 came around. People might remember this. It was the clown sightings on the news.
Here we go.
Do you remember? You remember this, do you? Yeah. I think everyone remembers this. And the whole Anglosphere, because it was predominantly happening in white Western European speaking countries, you know, wherever that is, wherever they settled. This was happening in all those places. On every news station, every minor little news station, and every minor little community, wherever that is, was reporting on this happening in their own community. Vast scale hysteria over this situation, and people were feeding into it, you know, and were standing on street corners looking menacing, waving at kids and stuff like this, you know, on the edge of parks, or standing menacingly in forests. And many people have tried to explain it away as the doorstep killer in Florida. She's an interesting case. But people try to explain it away as kind of like it's just a stunt for the new It film that was coming out or something like this, you know. But it's actually not the first time this has happened in history, you know. It happened in I think it was 1986 in Boston, I think it was. And there was clowns going around in vans trying to get kids to come into them on a mass scale, and it caused mass hysteria. It already happened. And they tried to pin that after the fact on, that was just a publicity stunt for Stephen King's book being released, It. But this had actually happened years before Stephen King even wrote the book. So this is not a new phenomenon, people dressing like clowns in some kind of ritualistic setting and trying to lure children to them. It's actually happened quite a lot throughout history. Maybe going all the way back to the Pied Piper, who knows? But that's just off the cuff there. But this event sparked my imagination, this 2016 clown sightings, because I knew enough about the occult and about secret societies and the agenda against us by that point to know that nothing gets on that black box in the corner of your living room unless they want you to see it. It means something. It's a symbol. It's an occult symbol. Whatever the clown is to these people, they want you to see it right now. It's a coded message for the initiated, and it's probably something simple for the masses, something silly and stupid and silly for the uninitiated, you know. So I had to get to the bottom of this. Like, what does the clown mean? It means something. They would not have put it everywhere just because it was a slow news day. It doesn't work like that, you know. There's a meaning behind this and why it was so widespread and why there were actors kind of feeding into it and spreading it and making it more hype than it needed to be. And that's when everything kind of coalesced, all this information I've been working on for the past 3 years of my life since, you know, being born again. And Nephilim, jesters, clowns, secret societies, disembodied spirits, the clown and the Nephilim and demons are all connected in some way. They mean something. Something's there, and whatever it is. So I started my series on the channel, which is up to 43 episodes now. I've been doing it for 8 years since that day, you know. And the first early episodes are the ramblings of a madman. They're absolutely insane and not very well put together, and just I cringe listening back to them. But it's me formulating my thoughts together on the situation, trying to figure out what's going on here. What does this mean, you know? And it's one connection that's just been coming one after the other since that day. And yeah, it's turned into a book, you know, and it's become a whole thing. And it turns out, to quickly summarize it, the clown, as we call it in the West, is a purposefully crafted caricature of Nephilim-esque features, copied and based after the Rakshasa demons of India specifically, which is this their flavor of Nephilim, we'll say.
Right.
And it's used as a tool to channel the spirits, and this is actually a practice used in many cultures all over the earth. And what we call a clown costume is just our Western version of the same costumes worn by these ancestor spirit worship cultures all over the earth. It was created by Freemasons for this specific purpose. It's an occult symbol. You're not supposed to know it means this, but to the initiated, it's actually a very serious thing. Yeah.
Well said, Paul. I mean, that's one heck of a story, and a lot of it speaks to me personally, actually, and I can relate in some areas. And I know there's a whole lot to tackle with this subject,
Mhm.
but maybe let me ask you right there what you kind of ended up on is
Mhm.
the role that secret societies play in the clown costume, and not only popularizing the clown kind of stereotype, archetype even, but the circus itself, which
Mhm.
is kind of what segued me into this whole topic. Was in Florida we have the Ringling Circus,
Yeah.
right? And the Ringling Circus, I was watching some of your stuff um, about the secret societies and clowns, and I was wondering if you've ever. I know that you know about the Royal Order of Jesters,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So the Shriners are a Masonic adjacent community.
Mhm.
You know, it's a society within Masonry, you could say. But you have to be, for those who don't know out there, you have to be a Master Mason to become a Shriner.
Yeah.
The Shriners are the Masons who wear the red fezzes. That's what they're most known for.
Mhm.
They use like the nomenclature and motifs and aesthetic of Arabic diplomats. But what's interesting is they're dedicated to having fun, or
Yeah.
something along the lines. That's part of the vow, that's part of the initiation, and that's part of their kind of slogan. Their motto is having fun, something
Mhm.
along those lines. Now, I got into this because just like the Ringling Circus, Shriners International is headquartered in Tampa Bay, Tampa, Florida. So, and those two places are not very far from each other. I mean, that's a nice leisurely drive. I've done it all the time from Sarasota, the Ringling headquarters, to Tampa. It's like an hour in the car, maybe a little more, and it's like a beautiful drive. You know, it would be no problem knocking that out in a day, right? Plenty of people do.
Mhm.
So, not very far at all, right? Just the bay kind of separating them for the most part. And there's some other interesting, sites in there that I've talked about a lot on my channel. But that's how I got into this whole clown rabbit hole. And looking into the Shriners, I've also done some big videos on the fast food conspiracy. And I'm sure, as you've covered, the clown comes up a lot in fast food,
Yeah,
doesn't
the
it?
red-haired, white-skinned mascot is actually really common, surprisingly. Yeah, very common.
Exactly.
It's odd, isn't it?
So,
But I'll let you go on that
so,
one. Yeah.
so I'd love if you could touch on um, how much have you looked into the Shriners, and why are they the clown people? Why isn't it just a Mason thing? Because it's like almost like a Russian doll. You have to be a Mason, then you go within there. You have to be a Shrine. You
Yeah,
get to be
yeah.
a Shrine,
Not all Masons
right?
are Shriners, but every Shriner is a Mason. That's for sure. And then the Royal Order of the Jesters is a step above Shrining, and you actually have to you have to be chosen to be a member of the Royal Order of the Jesters. Only 13 members per year are actually chosen
Right.
from the elite, trusted members of the Shriners who have proven themselves to be up for a good time. Are they down to clown? Are they cool? It's that type of
Right.
thing. And so let's just get into the history of a clown costume. I guess it's probably the best way to kind of lead into from then to now. How this kind of happened, and then the development of the modern circus, and into what it is today, and where the Shriners kind of played the role, I suppose. So first of all, a clown costume, as we understand it today, like what you see there, that's based on a hobo clown. That was quite actually popularized more during the Great Depression. I think Emmett Kelly is the one who popularized that through the Sarasota Ringling brothers, actually. I don't know if that is Emmett Kelly. I'm not sure who it is, but that's where that image came from. But clowns themselves are actually quite a modern creation, as you see them there. Like this type of clown was only actually created in about 1799. And it was created for the Sadler's Wells Theatre in London for a pantomime show, basically. Now, this pantomime tradition goes all the way back to Rome. We're talking 500 AD, roughly, around this time. So with the collapse of Rome and actors kind of being considered something like a prostitute, dirty, pretending to be something you're not in a new, highly Christianized, Catholicized, Roman Catholic type of world, traveling actors became quite a common thing. If rich and influential people didn't hire these actors to be personal jesters, which is where jesters came through the Middle Ages. It's kind of a commodity to have your own funny man, because who's going to tell the king he can't have an actor, a personal actor on his side. But jesters are one thing. They were mimics of the king. They were just literally personal comedians. They're not really actually very important to this theory in many ways. The jester aesthetic evolved into the more Venetian carnival style as time went on, but even that was based on something called Harlequin, which is actually modeled after the wild man of Europe. So what happened was you had this group of traveling actors coming out of Rome and Italy who had stock characters who wore masks, who represented characters everybody could know, like a soldier, the rich man, the daughter of the rich man, the the policeman, the judge, or whatever it is, the glutton or something. Just funny characters that everyone can kind of, you see, what type of person that's going to be. Stock characters, and yeah, Harlequin was actually a servant of the rich man, along with the clown. And it wasn't called the clown; it was called Pedrolino originally. And the foil, the joke was that Pedrolino was the slow-witted fool, and Harlequin or Arlecchino was the mischievous, quick-witted devil character who was too smart for his own good. But they were both servants of the rich man. And the comedy came from Harlequin stealing Columbine, the daughter of the rich man, and running away with her. So the slow-witted Pedrolino clown and his master would chase after Harlequin and the daughter, and that's the comedy for an hour. That is the show, one scene change after another, chasing each other, But Harlequin was actually quite a late addition. He wasn't really added till about the mid 15. It would have been 16th century, I suppose, and he's not actually an original stock character. He was only added quite late on. As you can see, this is in 1601 in his earliest iterations. Arlequin, and as you can see, white skin, patchy colours, beast-like face and visage, and there's a reason why he looked like this. He changed into what you see there on the screen now, slowly over about 300 years from the 1500s. So by the time clowns come along as we know them, this is what Harlequin looks like. Fancy, prim and proper, upright, well-dressed, groomed, and he's kind of a lovesick fool who just loves Columbine and wants to be with her. But originally, he was that brutish, hunched-over beast character you saw there, He was actually crude and rude and vicious, and used his stick to poke people up the backside. He was like pretending it was his phallus all the time. Very sexually charged. Very acrobatic, magical in a sense. His slapstick, he would change the scene when he hit it on the ground. And that's
Jesus. They're gonna get us demonetized. Jesus.
So he had like magical powers. He was
someone put the AC on it.
Yeah, well, he was supposed to be a demon. That's the point. He had magical powers. He was an ethereal character that was added later to this movement called the Comédie de l'Art, which came out of this traveling troupe through 1,000 years all throughout Europe. And the traveling troupe would put on shows, come into the town square, whip up a quick stage, do a quick improvised show with the characters' masks, and everyone would laugh, put money in a hat, move on to the next place. That was their living. It was the first traveling circus, if you want to call it anything, you know what I mean? Something akin to it. But what happened was, because they traveled all through Europe, from the tips of Portugal all the way to even like quite far into Russia, everywhere, as far as you could go in every country, there wasn't a part of Europe these people hadn't traveled to. It was a tradition kept alive, quite well. They kind of noticed there's this character that keeps appearing in every place we go. It's called the Wild Man. Like every single country in Europe has a Wild Man tradition where they kind of fast for a period after a giant party. And in this party, they were dressed like wild, hairy, colourful, wide-grinning, horned beast monsters. And to many capacities, some of them more hairier and dull than others more colourful and psychedelic and diamond-encrusted than others. There was a vast range of styles and looks to these wild men. But they were basically based off of roaming, club-wielding giants of the forest. So Nephilim, that's what they were based off of. And there's an old Dionysus from the Thracian culture at the time, which is, I think it's kind of like Romania today, around that region, that they still have their cookery alive today, as they call it, a wild man tradition, which is still just as it was then. It's not changed. They've kept it very much alive. But they have like this history of the wild hunt as well. But then they have this Dionysus myth, which is where Dionysus comes from, by the way. He was kind of like a foreign god when he turned up into the Roman Greek regions. But he was like the master of the wild horde. He kind of had a slapstick of his own. He had the thyrsus, the pine cone stick, and Mercury had the caduceus. So you'll find there's like this Mediterranean influence to Harlequin. He's kind of modeled after the quick, light-footed, witty Mercury, the messenger of the gods, but also the wild beast, sexually charged type of Dionysus person who basically went from village to village with a massive orgy party, gathering new Maenads and satyrs to his army, going on this massive party wherever they went. And he very much had this ability to transform humans into beasts. Things like that, and it seems like the longer they were around him for, the more they changed and became more wild-like. And there's lots to be said about, removing oneself from civilization and going to a more animalistic state, symbolically speaking, and all this type of thing. But there's actually this 10th century monk in France who documented this, and it's in the book. I can't remember the name specific now, but he documented his encounter with Harlequin. But he called it Helicins. Helicins is the name he gave to this wild beast monster who was tall with a club and had a band of merry little demons that followed him everywhere. A lot like Dionysus, very similar parallels, But this wasn't a party, this was a massacre. It roamed through the village and destroyed everything. Dionysus is more, it roamed through the village and destroyed everything morally, I suppose, in more not a physical sense, different type of thing. But you find these influences were all kind of coming together with the Northern Europe and the Southern Mediterranean Europe, and what was created for the Commedia dell'arte movement, based on all these traditions they were hearing about of the wild man, was Harlequin, named after Helicins of the French tradition. So that's where we get Harlequin from. He's quite literally a representation of the Nephilim of Europe, which are quite a hairy bunch, probably because it's colder. I think they had genetic adaptation to environments, and I think the European flavour of Nephilim were quite hairy creatures. You'll find the further south you go into Africa or India, they're quite skinless, hairless, and naked all the time. It's quite different, But
talking about these kind of entities or creatures in Northern Europe, I can't help but think of Nephilim, right? Is that below the Yggdrasil, right? It's one of the layers beneath Yggdrasil, kind of the world tree. It's almost like a hell or purgatory of sorts.
Where the spirits of the Nephilim would reside from a Christian perspective, I guess. But I personally don't think the spirit realm and the earth are two separate things. I'm very much akin of like, they're the same place. There's just a perception issue from our perspective. We just don't perceive it. But they're here with us right now. We just don't see them. And I think the spirit realm and the earth are necessary for each other. I think I consider the spirit realm like the plumbing of our universe, of our side. It's like the code that makes it happen. It's the wiring behind the walls that makes the place we live work. We need it. It's completely normal, natural, not a bad place at all, not something to be feared. It's functional in many ways. It's the warp to the woof of a rug. The wug arabesque is perfect on top, but underneath it's a mess where all the strings attach because it needs to happen to make the thing where we live happen. And I think the DMT realm, the spirit realm, or in many people have described this realm in many different ways, like Nilfheim. But I think it's okay. It's just infested with parasites we call the Nephilim today, and I think it's been mythologized in many ways throughout many cultures. But I'm just giving you my basic Christian interpretation of what I just perceive it as today, to be honest, from my own experiences. But yeah, these stories you hear, there's definitely overlap. There's definitely overlap with everything I'm saying. And again, I go through a lot of cultures in the book and just their own mythoses and different stories on every continent. And you realize they all have their own giant mythology, all of them. And there's many different nuances, name changes, culturally specific, regionally specific hero stories that aren't the same as other continents. But if you just look at it as more as a holistic thing, it's just more corroborating evidence that giants were everywhere. They weren't just in the Middle East somewhere in Canaan. Everyone had encountered these, and everyone had their own creation myth as to how they were made, and it's kind of some more dramatic than others, some more on the nose than others, some more highly symbolic and weirder than others. But I think it's all just based on cultural aesthetics, really, that the differences. But when you get down to the meat of it, they're all kind of telling the same story, just in their own way. And it's quite incredible. Like I said, the European version of the Wild Man is where you get the first proto clown from. Harlequin, which is a part of the first proto circus. He's quite literally modeled after demons. And then you have, Harlequin quite late in the game attached to the other servant character that was already in the game called Pedrolino. If you type in Pedrolino, actually, it might be a good practice so you can understand what he used to look like before we go on to how it turned into the monster we have today. But he's just wearing plain white servant rags, completely white. He has like a Pedrolino, as it sounds.
Thank you.
Yeah. But if you just find any image of him, he's just plain white servant rags. Yeah, he's a zany character. There's nothing to him, really. If you just go on Google Images, you'll find hundreds of examples. But he didn't have any color or anything like that. Very, again, just monotone, white, no color. Nothing like that. And again, he was like a dull, slow servant. Nothing like, and the comedy that was his character. That's his comedy. He's dumb. And we laugh at his expense. That's the point. You'll find, obviously, the French iteration of this as time went on was Poirot, the sad sack clown who's pining after the daughter of the rich man, upset that she doesn't want him but wants Harlequin instead. That's the French version of Pedrolino, but the Italian tradition is what you see right there. So that's kind of, again, it was never supposed to be anything demonic originally. This is that's again quite a later iteration, but the one you see there in the top left corner next to the Poirot, that's kind of what it was originally, just a buttoned up tunic, a floppy hat, a bit of a floppy ruffle, and that was it. Kind of like an Elizabethan dog body, just a manservant. Now, a floppy ruffle is because the rich people had starch, and they can make those really stiff. So if you weren't rich, yours was floppy. That's kind of the joke. You know what I mean? You can afford the starch to make your ruffle stiff, like Queen Elizabeth could, or something like that. So there's Pedrolino teamed up with Harlequin, the demon. But as time went on, Harlequin got boring. He stopped being so demonic. He got a tighter leotard, started a bit more fancy, a bit more like well-spoken, and he kind of became like a boring character. He lost his demonic edge. And in the UK, by this point, the tradition had kind of taken its own style. And British comedy is nothing like the European comedy. It was much more brash and brutish and slapsticky and silly, a lot more silly. The French were a bit more serious. Like I said, they had the crying Poirot with the black tears and the pom-poms and stuff. But it's kind of their version of Pedrolino in Britain was called Clown, which was a colloquial term for clodhopper, basically. And that's where you get the first word clown being associated with this character, this servant character called Pedrolino, who was friends or partnered with Harlequin, the original demon clown. So Harlequin lost his demonic edge, and British clown kind of took over as the demon, because there's a void. Who's going to play the demonic role now? And British clown was taking over that role.
Also, just real quick,
go.
We get the word, there's many words where the R and the L swap and bear a great, kind of message or symbolism. Regal and legal, royal and loyal, right? You got the right, left, red, blue, blue has an L in it, right? Most words, many words for blue have L, many reds for R have R. Red, many words for red have R. Excuse me. Got the DMT elves are tugging at my tongue or something, but
yeah.
Another one that really jumps out to me. I'm an astrologer, and I'm big into astrology. And according to astrology, the good kind, Saturn, the planet Saturn, is the bad guy, right? Biblically, that would be Satan. Satan and Saturn are one and the same.
Kronos?
Right?
Is that Kronos as well? Yeah.
Correct. Yep. Kronos would also be Saturn.
Mhm.
In the Norse or Germanic pantheon, it would be Loki, right? And phonetically, we can kind of link all these together. We get the word crown from Kronos, like you pointed out.
Mhm.
All it takes is a simple R to an L, and we go from crown to clown.
Mhm.
And just those two words next to each other, it's like putting dog next to God. There's a story. There's a dynamic between the two. Many RL swapped words have this.
Mhm.
And crown and clown, Saturn, he's not only the lord of this world, the bad guy, the villain, the god of time, death, all these things. He's also the god of comedy,
Mhm.
tragedy and comedy, right? So you see the mask coming into play.
Mhm.
You see, and people born under the sign of Capricorn, right, are said to be ruled by Saturn. This is also where we get the word satire.
Mhm.
Many great comedians are born under Capricorn. Jim Carrey would be a great example, right? Very much a jester, right? If there's ever been a modern day jester, Jim Carrey's pretty close on the big screen, right?
He's
And
a modern day mimic, which comes from Roman tradition of mimes, where miming comes from, which is again the ability to transform your face to be as another, and he's very good.
point.
He's very good at doing that, absolutely. And he was in the film The Mask, funnily enough, which is about putting on the image of Loki, the trickster god, and becoming one with him and being possessed by him, which is a lot what my work is about. You put on the costume of a clown, you're actually opening yourself up to be channeling the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, because that's what they looked like. You're actually taking on their image, creating a channel, and allowing them into your vessel. And Jim Carrey, a quite literal clown, symbolically with everything else, astrologically from the sounds of it, is in a movie where he puts on a mask and takes on the role of the trickster god Loki. So it is kind of, they've been telling you this for a while, is what I'm saying. This is not like a hidden thing, actually, once you know what you're looking for. It's just been an occulted symbol for quite a while, and I guess I figured it out, and here we are now, But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of connections, phonetically speaking, with all of this work. It's one thing after another. Yeah.
Another one that jumps out to me is laughter and slaughter, right? Of course, Saturn being the god planet associated with not only satire and dark black humor, but also animal blood and worse, sacrifice, types of sacrifice.
Well, I actually think there's a fine line between laughter and crying. I think the muscles involved and the parts of the brain that light up and everything about it, it's the same process. You can cry with joy, or you can cry with sadness. And when you hear the manically insane laughing, it can quite quickly switch to sounding like they're in agony. Have you ever heard a toddler laugh or scream or cry like a baby? They can very quickly switch between the two. It's odd. Like they can be laughing 1 second and then suddenly they're screaming and crying in anger and pain the next.
Yeah,
and it's because it's the same place. It's the same emotion. It's all linked, And I think something like Monsters Inc. is a good example of this. And we have these creatures in a realm that mirrors our own. That's very much like our own, but they need scream power in order to fuel their world. We call it loosh. It's quite a popular term, this idea that they feed off negative energy. And at the end, they discover that laughter is just as powerful, if not more so. So they start making kids laugh instead to feed off that energy to fuel the world, because they're actually the same. They're in the same realm, of energy type of thing. So I think, laughter itself and crying and that idea, there's something there. Like it's symbolically they've been telling us for a while, and I think it is to do with energy harnessing in many ways, harvesting, shall I say. I think it's like they're trying to get something out of us. So when you see people like laughing manically, you have to wonder what kind of spirit's actually behind that sometimes. Because I imagine like these creatures who are stuck in the DMT realm permanently. I mean, I was blessed that I get to come back after 10 minutes, but if you're stuck there forever, I imagine you would lose your mind a little bit. You go a bit insane. You would end up melding into each other all the time because you haven't got a body anymore, and you just everything's shifting all the time. There's nothing to grab onto, no tangibility. You've got all these urges, you thirst and you hunger and you desire for everything you once had when you had a body, but you've got no senses to experience those things with. You would start to lose your mind, and I think the creatures in this DMT realm, the spirit realm, are laughing maniacal clown monsters who just laugh hysterically all the time, because they're in pain, they're in agony, and that's why they want a body. That's why they crave a body. They want to. That's what the whole point of demon possession is. They want your body so they can experience what it is to have a body again through you vicariously. So when someone's possessed, they're usually influenced to do things they wouldn't ordinarily do because the demon in their body wants to experience that thing, And perfect possession is that the host doesn't even know they're possessed. They think they made those choices, And I find myself in my own experiences, when I gave up my hedonistic lifestyle, that's when I got demonically attacked. That's when they revealed themselves to me. That's when I started to, because I think it was more like if we can't have you, then nobody can type of situation. But as soon
almost like when you detox, you get really sick, right? It's not that you got sick. It's that you were numbing, clogging everything up. It's only when you reverse the flow that it really all comes to the surface.
Absolutely.
Right? There's a parallel there with detoxing that I think most people can.
Funnily enough, I've actually done an episode on the demonic parasite connection with another YouTuber called Alpha Talks, and there's actually so many parallels between demons and parasites. It's unbelievable.
Oh yeah,
and even the
worms, serpents.
Oh yeah, and that's a whole other rabbit hole. But it went viral. There's actually a real hunger for that topic out there because it was a throwaway video for us. It's on like 500,000 views. It blew up, and because people are like clocking onto this idea that parasites have way more control over us than we realize. And I'm not here to like say all parasites are necessarily demons, but I feel like parasites are a useful conduit for someone to be more demonized. If you know what I mean, but there's a lot to be said about that. But I think there's many methods for possession, many ways you can let them in. The costume of a clown is just one. It's one example. There's many ways to do it, and that's kind of I'm just talking about one facet here of spiritual warfare. The way you dress matters. It actually really, really does matter. And ancestor spirit worship cultures all over the earth who channel their ancestor spirits, as they call them, they're not talking about grandma or granddad. They're talking about ancient primordial gods that built their civilization. They're talking about the Nephilim. Okay, they were revered in their cultures as gods at some point. And they considered the creator of their cultures because the Nephilim did teach people a lot of things. They were sharing knowledge they got from their own fathers in heaven. It was quite a crazy time pre-flood world and just after the flood as well. So when they dress in a certain way, when they white the skin up, put polka dots on their skin or multicolored bejeweled outfits that are really shiny and colorful and feathered headdresses that are red or something or made of reeds, they're dressing what we would call today from a Western standard as a clown. But they don't. To them, it's not a clown. It's a representation of the spirits, and they want to commune with them, so they dress like them to create a channel. Just because we don't think in the West that this is a thing, to us it's just trivial. It's nonsense. That's just superstitious bullshit. Basically, we don't understand what we're playing with. Really, we're playing with fire and don't understand that. And you're looking at the Heyokas and the fools of the Pueblo regions, and there's actually many versions of this, the Heyoka throughout the Americas. The sacred clowns, they call them clown societies, the ones that do this. But the Heyoka demon is that thing riding on a horse up there that you just saw. That's what it actually is. It's a thunder god. They bring thunder, and it's white-skinned polka dots, animal-human hybrid monster of some kind, But what you find is the great spirit,
rainbow monsters.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. They bring storms. They're very much. Nephilim seem to be very much connected with storms and rain. They were always linked to that in some way. The storm bringers. It's like they had powers. They probably did have powers. They were part divine. Maybe they could have controlled the weather. I don't know. But you find like different. Depends where they are. The more Pueblo, the hotter regions of America, like the Nevada desert, they dress like this in order to get in touch with the great spirit, the Wakinyan, through the Heyoka, the shaman, who then by channeling the entity of rain, the rain god, they're asking it to bring rain, because they're suffering droughts. But funnily enough, if you go further north to like the Lakota tribes, they'd have their Heyoka for a different reason. They dress this way. It's the same way, by the way, black and white lines, fractal patterns, and everything like this. They dress the same, but they're doing it because they want the rain to stop, because they're getting flooded and it's killing them, and they don't like it. The storm is destroying them. So regionally, they have their own personal reasons for why they want to get in touch with the Wakinyan spirit, with this spirit that brings rain. But aesthetically, they dress the same because they're communicating with the same entity, and I think every continent or region has their own version of this. If you type in the Wand Gina, so WAND WAND, so wand, Gina, so JINA, Wand Gina, yeah. These are the Aboriginals of Australia.
Who's hungry for Wendy's?
So these are what they paint on the rock arts, and they are white-skinned, wild afro, red-haired, red-nosed, ruffle around the neck, polka dot on the body, clowns. Okay, but they're not clowns. These are rain spirits. These are the offspring of the rainbow serpent who came down to Earth and had offspring. And these were their offsprings of the rainbow serpents. So these are the offspring of the seraphim angels, the fiery flying serpents of the Bible. These are the cultural, aesthetical versions of the Kimberley region of Western Australia. This is their version of Nephilim. Okay? And look at them. They are a clown by any stretch of the imagination. This is exactly what we would look at and call a clown today. It's even got a clown costume on, And it's not because they know about clowns. It's because we have copied that in the West. We have looked at all these cultures and made our own costume based on all of these, or at least the secret societies did. Do you get what I mean? They stole the image of other cultures to make our own version of it. Our version is an amalgam caricature of all of these other costumes all over. For instance, you have the you were just looking at the Heyoka then, for example. They wear red shoes, just like clowns typically wear big red shoes. And it's kind of because it's another trait taken from them for our version of it. Do you understand? And it's kind of, when you realize this, it's kind of, we've just made our own spirit channeling costume, but nobody knows. Nobody knows that's what it's for. So what's the danger where we have the Joker being rebooted every year? And then everyone's dressing like that for Halloween, where they constantly keep it fresh in the consciousness, the clown, through a new serial killer, a new It reboot of some kind, a new clown slasher house movie, or a new Joker reboot. They keep the clown popular all the time, so people are constantly dressing this way, more so. Even today, in 2023, Elle Fashion Week, high-end runway fashion of Europe, was dressing like clowns. Clowncore aesthetic. They're pushing it on the people now through the outlets to dress like clowns as a legitimate fashion choice, and you realize, and there's lots to be said about the red shoe thing, as well, if you've heard anything about what that represents through the secret societies. I probably can't even say it. I can't even say it because it's so disgusting. But when you put this together, you realize that they're trying to get as many people dressing this way as possible because it opens up more channels readily for demons to interact with our reality. But because we don't know that's what the costume is for, we're ignorant to it. I don't believe ignorance of the spiritual law makes us immune to the spiritual laws, unfortunately. And all these other cultures know full well what happens when you dress that way. The spirit comes into their body. They give it stuff by eating and drinking blood and biting the heads off of chickens or smoking or drinking or whatever it is, because the demon in them wants to feel those things, and it'll do it through their senses. Use my senses, use my tongue, my eyes, my nose, my ears, my fingers to feel the pleasure of the things I'm putting in my body, demon. But I want something in return. It's a transaction. I want the strength of 10 men. I want the ability not to be stabbed. I want to be able to be bulletproof. I want to, I don't know, anything. It's usually something like that. I want to be rich. They have it's like a genie request, but it's a transaction. You've got to give the demon something first. And the first step is let it in your body. That's the first deal, Give it stuff that it wants. and then it'll do stuff for you in return. And that's what these cultures do. They do it regularly. It's a Tuesday to them. It's not to us. It's like weird behind the scenes stuff that happens in covens, you know. But it's a lot of these cultures. It's not. It's day to day life. They commune with the ancestors all the time, you know.
Now, Paul, what's interesting is I've done a couple videos on Jekyll Island, and I'm sure you've heard a bit about the Federal Reserve, Jekyll Island, all that stuff.
You might know more about it than I do, to be honest, but I've heard of it, yeah.
Now, what's interesting is one of the rooms where they drafted the Federal Reserve with Rockefeller, you know, 6 of the richest men in the world, representatives of the Rothschilds and so on, all in the same room drafting the Federal Reserve. That room, according to, well, we know it's true, but archaeology proves it. But Tim Bentz told a great story explaining it on YouTube one time, that the room where they drafted the Federal Reserve was on top of a place where there used to be an Indian burial mound. And on this Indian mound, there was an altar. And this altar had been used, you know, as verified by the earliest European explorers to that area, that the natives there, they were taller than normal, much taller than average. And they were engaged in ritual child sacrifice. And that cottage is known as Indian Mound Cottage to this day. Anyone can go visit it. And on the floor of the room, on top of this ancient altar where John D. Rockefeller lived, the carpet is candy red. Candy red. And for those who don't know, the red shoe conspiracy has to do with ritual slaughter and ritual sacrifice. We won't say of what or for what, but basically those who engage in those practices don't like to ruin their shoes. And even black shoes can get ruined by red. And I don't know if this is across the board true, but the kind of the lore is that people engaged in these dark rites would wear red shoes to either hide drops of blood that would come down on their shoes, or to signify to others that that's the type of behavior that they engage in. And kind of a Rosemary's Baby type situation. And so that's interesting, you know. Whenever I see a red carpet, I also kind of think the same, right? Might have the same context to it.
It's really disturbing. It honestly is. I mean, again, the Freemason connection to all this, the Shriners connection, we're kind of getting there. So a lot of tangents, and honestly, this is a tangent-filled topic, so I love it. You know, it's not a problem. But if we go back to the history here, so we've caught up with time now, haven't we? So Harlequin is boring. Pedrolino in Britain is now the clown, and he's colourful, he's brash, he's bold, he's silly, he gets drunk and eats sausages and doesn't do what his boss tells him to do and doesn't care, you know. He's funny. He's a clown, it's funny, you know. Harlequin's boring, he's just obsessed with the woman and whatever, you know. So there's kind of a change in roles here. And you'll find what happened at the same time is there was this big actor called Joseph Grimaldi. And he was actually very much an establishment actor in these theatres since being a child. He was raised in it. His father, called the Signor Grimaldi, he came over from Italy as a dentist for Queen Charlotte, of all things. But he then set up himself as a dance instructor in the Royal Theatre, and then very much became the showrunner and like the trainer of the staff in Sadler's Wells and the Royal Theatre. So he had his son working shows in both. So Joseph Grimaldi, the young Grimaldi, kind of grew up in this scene. And his father passed away. He still stayed in the tradition, and he played many roles on stage, you know, as many different people over the years. And he ended up marrying the daughter of the man who owned the Sadler's Wells Theatre, called Richard Hughes. And she died at childbirth. So he was very depressed, Joseph Grimaldi. He was like, he went into like a suicidal stupor, you know, ended up shooting himself in the foot with a prop gun at the same time as well. He was going through the walls. He was having a bad time, you know what I mean? So yeah, he wasn't in a good way. He was on suicide watch. He was constantly being watched by everybody because of this. But on her deathbed, she said to her father, Richard Hughes, look after poor Joe. Look after him. You know, it's kind of her last ask of her father, you know. So her father was obligated to look after this young actor who now was going to be his son-in-law, but is now just an actor who works for his company. You know, it became this after his daughter died. But he looked after him, you know, he kept the promise. So he said to this new showrunner he'd just hired to run the Sadler's Wells Theatre, you better give Joseph Grimaldi a leading role. You give him bigger roles. You know, you put him higher pay, higher roles, more authority, basically, you know, more of a front and center position. So this young person he asked to do this was called Charles Dibdin Jr. Charles Dibdin Jr. was the son of his mate, Charles Dibdin Sr. So Richard Hughes has this mate called Charles Dibdin. Charles Dibdin Sr. is like an extremely famous guy of this time. You can type it in, you know, Charles Dibdin Sr. He was a playwright, a musician, a score writer. He wrote a lot of music for the Royal Navy, the British Royal Navy, which he was equated with keeping the morale of the Royal British Royal Navy high during wartime. You know, they equate their victories to his music. He's very esteemed. Even today, they still play one of his songs at the end closing ceremonies of what's it called? The proms in Britain. It's a yearly orchestral ceremony. And he always closes with Charles Dibdin's song, Tom Bowling is called, named after his brother who died in India. So we'll get to that in a minute, okay? So he has a son, Charles Dibdin Jr., who has just been hired as the showrunner for Richard Hughes' theatre, Sadler's Wells. Nepotism at its finest. My dad knows a guy, and he got me this job. You know what I mean? So he's now working in this theatre as writing the new shows, and he very much wanted to make a name for himself. So yeah, the son of this guy wanted to make a name for himself. And he decided, so there's the younger. Yeah, he's the one who headed up the Sadler's Wells Theatre. So there it is. And he had this young actor who he has to work with because the boss, Richard Hughes, says, give this guy a leading role, you know. But at the same time, there was this old classically trained actor he was called, I think it was called Jacques Dubois or something like that. I might be getting the first name wrong, but Dubois was what he was known as. And he has kind of always played the clown. He is the house clown. He always plays that role. But he was old, bit of a drunk, and young Grimaldi was better, you know. But how am I going to break it to this establishment actor who we've had for ages, you know, that we're going to replace him basically? So young Charles Isaac Mungo Dibdin here had an idea. We'll have two clowns. So what he did, he dressed them in this new style of dress, which is very much akin to the costumes worn by the Rakshasa demons on the temples of India. It's identical. In fact, it's pretty much the same thing. And they kind of they clown to the death of one another. And Joseph Grimaldi was clearly the funnier clown, and Dubois was disgraced and kind of never went back to theatre. He went back to France or something like that. So now we have this young actor, Grimaldi, who's just proved himself to be hilarious. He's like the funniest man to ever exist. And he's been dressed in this new costume, which looks just like something from the temples of Bali. You know, so if you type in Rakshasa demon Bali temple, just type in Rakshasa demon Bali temple, and there's plenty of examples. I can just point to one, and I can show you exactly where they got the costume from.
What's interesting is Bali, I believe, is a word meaning sacrifice. And we can firmly link it to the word Baal in the Bible as well.
It's also known as the island of the gods as well, Bali. That's what it's known as. But if you just type in into Google Images, it's probably where you're going to get what I'm after here. These are examples of Rakshasas. They have this look on their face, that smile, the buck teeth, the bulging eyes. But that one right there to the left, in the middle right now, down that one, that costume is what they basically dressed them in.
Right.
And it's actually uncanny. So I don't know if you can maybe open a new tab, and I'll show you just how uncanny this is. Just type in Joseph Grimaldi, and I'll show you exactly the costume he was wearing and where they got their inspiration from.
Okay. Which one?
So the one where he's doing the handstand.
Yeah.
So compare the two. and you'll realize they're basically wearing the exact same costume. One's just upside down, but they're in the same pose, actually, funnily enough. So this is like, and perhaps a more later iteration of the original dress costume that they were wearing, but it's basically the same principle. Now, remember what I told you Pedrolino used to look like? Completely white, plain servant rags. Then suddenly, when this young son of a extremely famous Freemason, Charles Dibdin, gets in control of the theatre, he decides to change the costume of the most popular character to represent that of a Rakshasa demon of India. And there's a reason for this. It's because Charles Dibdin Sr. went back and forth to India a lot. He's actually going to move there in his memoirs, but he decided last minute not to go because of bad weather. Back then, sailing to India was you could have died. It wasn't easy to sail back then, or to travel. But he decided against it and lived his rest of his years in England. But his brother, Tom, who died for the East India Company while they were colonizing India, he went back and forth to visit him all the time. He was in love with Indian iconography. He was also a member of the Leicester Freemason Lodge number 2365 or something like that. He was a very famous man, a very powerful media mogul, a prominent Freemason, and obsessed with India. And then suddenly his son gets given control of the theatre and dresses the most famous actor like this. It's not a coincidence. This is where they got their inspiration from. They literally just copied this and dressed a clown like that. So, Harlequin, the first proto-clown, modelled way after the wild man of Europe. Modelled after Nephilim. And then clown, in British tradition, gets a new dress, perfectly modelled after the Indian flavour of Nephilim. The Rakshasas, okay, which are giant man-eating monsters. Then you have the Asuras, which are supposedly the good versions or something. There's a lot, again, they have their own mythos and ideas and battles. But this is what the Nephilim would have looked like. This buck-toothed, wide-grinning, bulging-eyed visage that you see, you know. They had predominantly a white-based skin with patterns all over it, like a serpent, inherited from their fiery flying serpent fathers. But they also had the human-esque features like arms and legs. But human? No. Conan the Barbarian hench bodybuilder? Not really. They were terrifying to behold. And they were wild and glowing. You know, they were part divine. They didn't look human. They looked like clowns. And, well, I should probably say is clowns look like Nephilim is the true title. But it doesn't roll off the tongue as much as the Nephilim look like clowns, does it really? But there's like a basic introduction to what I'm talking about. Like if you want to get really literal about it, not religious at all, you don't have to even get into biblical theology if you don't want to. Quite literally, historically speaking, all clowns throughout history have been modeled after demons. Nothing changed. That costume you see now that Joseph Grimaldi was wearing became the industry standard for the next 200 years. 200 years. So there you go. He's called the father of modern clowning. Everyone equates him to creating the costume. It wasn't. It was the son of a very famous Freemason who made that costume. But no one knows that. Unless you go looking, It's not even hidden. It's in the memoirs. They wrote about it, Even someone who, it's funny, I got it in the book, but I quote a biographer who was writing about it. And even he says, God, it looks like something straight out of Indian demonology. Even he says it without realizing it literally is. He doesn't know that. Yeah. But even he's like recognizing it. It's quite clear as day. It's kind of like, this looks like an Indian demon. And
that's very interesting.
It was, So there's just the historical aspect of where you get a costume of a clown from. Since then, you've had the development of the circus going out of Britain to the traveling circuses of America. And a lot of the early circuses in America burnt down and didn't last very well because they were doing the English model, which is stationary buildings where people come to. But they just didn't last. I don't know why, all of them set on fire all the time. So the traveling circus became more of a thing with the invention of the railway lines and the ability to shift things. It was a big cooperative effort between a lot of rich people, but they came up with the concept of we'll put the tent on a train and travel from place to place around the country, and we'll bring the circus to them.
Yeah. Well, it's also a good way to keep the parents of the missing children off your heels, isn't it?
Well, there's a lot of that too. But this
running away with the circus.
The funny thing is, they were all Freemasons. All these people who did this, they were all Shriners as well, And the first early circuses were all run by Shriners. Sorry, go ahead.
No. You're doing a great job. I mean, there's so much to pack in. It's mind blowing. Before we get too far away from the Indian kind of correlations.
Mhm.
It's worth noting that there's 33 degrees, at least in the Scottish Rite,
Mhm.
in Freemasonry. And there's 33, not only are there 33, years in the life of Jesus, but there's also 33 deities in the Vedic pantheon, or major deities in the Vedic pantheon.
Mhm.
That's pretty interesting. We've been doing, on my channel, I've talked a lot about golf, because how golf is such a big Florida thing. It's also a big Scottish and British thing too, about the role golf plays in society. The cream of the crop are usually playing golf all day, and the esoteric and occult origins of golf, and of course how golf and Freemasonry almost come out of Scotland hand in hand, kind of at the same time.
Mhm.
And um, golf, actually, much of it comes out of India. And some of the first golf courses were in India. The English thought they were better to build over there. And actually, the first golf ball was chipped off of I think it's Buddhist, not Hindu. It might be Hindu, but I think it was Buddhist. But of course, Buddhism comes out of Hinduism. The first golf ball was chipped off of a Buddhist statue. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. No, that's interesting. Very
The
interesting.
first real golf ball that wasn't just feathers and hide packed together.
Mhm.
The kind of first plasticky style golf ball, chipped off of a piece of a statue, or it was part of the packaging of a statue of a Buddhist deity that was, I guess, sent to like a British lord or something.
That makes
And
sense.
that's where they got the material. So
Well, it's-
another, go ahead.
You said 33 there as well. Just to add on to that as well, it said that Mount Hermon was on the 33rd parallel, and it's also said that a third, so 33% of the angels rebelled in heaven as well and fell to earth. So it's all kind of linked symbolically together as the same thing.
Right.
There's a lot about that, and obviously Freemasonry, 33 degrees, 11's a big number as well in Freemasonry, which is 3 times 11 is 33. And yeah, they love playing with the numbers and the numerology throughout all of these things. And
Let's talk about the Shriners,
sure,
and the Royal Order of Jesters, and we'll tie it into Florida as much as we can too.
You might know more about that than me, to be honest, because you live in Florida. What do I know from England? I only know what I read about, to be honest. But so like I said, the traveling circus began, and it developed slowly. And these early circuses, they were Freemason led predominantly, and Shriner led, and also rich, influential businessmen type led as well. It was very much an entrepreneurial pursuit. People with money did it and started these things, but they all tend to be part of brotherhoods and fraternities of some kind. It's odd actually, because they all came together at one point. 10 circuses all came together as one giant circus to put on a show called King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, and they all combined all of their menageries and all the performers together to create like a ultimate 7-ring circus extravaganza of some kind, and it was just this epic show involving thousands of actors all dressed in like Babylonian like old garb, Freemason ritualistic garb, actually, specifically, because if you look into this, it turns out the artwork was created by Belossi Coralfi, a British Freemason artist who was quite famous at the time. You're seeing it there. The Ringling Blows, they were involved with it. 10 other circuses involved. There's a newspaper clipping there that tells you right next to that image. They're all coming together. Okay. It's going to be a massive show, huge, never before seen, traveling all through America, and even Europe in some cases. But every single costume was created by, I think it was the Henderson Arms Company. It doesn't exist anymore, but they used to make all the regalia for Freemason lodges, and they made all the costumes for this show. It was very much a Freemason in-house production. Okay, yeah. Every single member or leader of these circuses was a Freemason. All the Ringling brothers are Freemasons. All of them are. Bailey was a Freemason as well.
Master Masons.
P.T. Barnum was a member of the Odd Fellows, which is an offshoot of Freemasonry. And it's another case of not all Freemasons are Odd Fellows, but all Odd Fellows are Freemasons kind of situation, like the Shriners, it's all Freemason production. And King Solomon is what Freemasonry is obsessed with. It's about building Solomon's temple. They're obsessed with Solomon's temple and King Solomon. And if you look into the symbolism of a circus, you realize it's actually all Solomonic ritualistic mimicry. So you have the ringmaster, which is also wearing a black top hat. Now, a black top hat in Freemason lodges represents the crown of Solomon. They don't even hide this. This isn't even hidden knowledge. They'll tell you on their websites. That's what the top hat represents. And only the worshipful Grand Master of a lodge can wear a black top hat because it represents the crown of the king, specifically Solomon. It's a ritualistic thing. And then you look at a circus, you have the ringmaster. King Solomon supposedly had a magical ring that could control the demons to help build his temple, from Jewish traditions and mythologies coming afterwards. Well, he is the Lord of the Ring. He is the ringmaster, King Solomon, with his black top hat or his crown. That's what the ringmaster is. It's King Solomon, basically, at his court. And the circus is his court, where he uses the ring to orchestrate the clowns, which is King Solomon using the ring to summon demons to build his temple. It's symbolic references back to Solomonic rituals involving demons and the king. And that's what a circus is. That's what the ritualistic circus is. And P.T. Barnum, Phineas Taylor Barnum, for people want to know, the greatest showman, as that lovely film makes him out to be, is a good guy. He was a terrible human being. He was an abuser, a master manipulator, a con artist at his finest, an ultimate con man. And at the age of 60, he decided to get out of the game of having his own little museum of cons and lies and join the circuses. He got involved in circuses at quite an old age, and it turns out he was a member of, like I said, the Odd Fellows. And he invented the three-ring circus. Just type in the Odd Fellows logo. And it's three interlocking rings. So circuses have always been representations of Freemasonic lodge ritual. Always. They were never anything else. Unless you go all the way back to the proto-circuses of Europe with the Commedia dell'arte, which weren't. But they've developed over time into what you see today. And it's all been molded and orchestrated and put together through the Brotherhood. Shriners today run all the American circuses. They took over. They kind of became the ones that were given the circuses to use and go with. And they adopted the clown quite heavily into the group, because they know what the clown really represents. The demons they're in communion with, the ones they dress that way to channel, just like any other culture does. But they get to do it openly in the public and no one knows. Do you get what I mean? And what do? They have the hospitals full of sick, dying children. And then they go and visit these children dressed like a clown to elicit one of two reactions, laughter or fear. And as I told you earlier, it's all energy to a demon. Doesn't matter what the reaction is elicited, it feeds the demon. It's like salt versus sugar almost, kind of, right? It doesn't matter. Laughing, and laughing, crying. Studies have been done, and it's kind of children don't like clowns. They've never liked clowns. They were never for the kids. It's like the kid that likes clowns is the weirdo. They are the odd one out. They're not the norm. It's like 1 in 10 children maybe likes clowns. So who are they for? Like when you really get down to brass tacks, what are clowns really for? They're not for kids. Like they've sold it to us. They're not a joke. They're not even funny half the time. It's because they are created for this specific reason. They're an occult tool. They're a tool, And again, it's always been intimately linked with Freemasonry from the very beginning. And it's been adopted and molded into what it is today through the circuses of America. Yeah, and everything about it is just Freemasonic ritual representations in a silly public setting where the public just don't realize that's what they're paying for. The public pay to come to these rituals and take part. They don't realize it, And maybe it's changed a bit in the modern age. Circuses are old hat. It's the TV now. People don't go to the circus anymore en masse. But back in the day, it was all you did. What else are you going to do? There's nothing else to do. The circus comes to town. You go. You know what I mean? And you imagine the energy involved in these mass rituals of the time, And like I said, when you realize as well, the DMT realm is kind of like a circus in a way, like a fairground. Flashing lights, spinning wheels, multicolored pinwheels everywhere, and all this type of thing. It's very DMT-esque. Maybe the circus itself is quite literally a representation of the spirit realm as well, where the Nephilim reside, or the circus where the clown reside. It's all just symbolism to these people. It's all just mirrors. Go ahead. Sorry.
I've also touched on how the order in which they bring out the animals may be a complete story of symbolism in itself. You
It could
get
be.
what I mean?
It's actually illegal
Right.
now. They PETA got the better of them in like 2020 or something like that. Is
I
that
w-
right?
I would.
Go ahead.
You're right. I would love if everybody would go after this. Go check out my Ancient Elephants Prove Florida Was Atlantis video.
Wow.
Ancient Elephants Prove Florida Was Atlantis. At the end there, we talk about how there used to be ancient elephants in Florida, mastodon, mammoth, and other types of elephants.
Hmm.
And about how today Florida has there's something like 500 elephants in all of the Western Hemisphere or the Americas, and about 90% of those live in Florida, because when all the circuses ended, they were all just kind of sitting, not much to do with them, just left in Florida. And Florida's nice and warm, so they kept them there. They breed. Now Florida's home to hundreds and hundreds of elephants because they're ex-circus elephants. Like you're saying, they did have to give them up. That was a big controversy, 10 years ago or so. And we've got a really good section at the end of this. I'd like to play a little clip if you don't mind.
Go for it. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Because this is Mr. Feld, I think his name is, the new owner of the Ringling Circus. Like Paul's saying, this is my rabbit hole. I love the circus stuff. This is kind of where our research kind of comes up alongside each other. I got into all this looking into elephants first, believe it or not. Why are there so many elephants in Florida in ancient times and modern times? And come to find out, it's all because of the circus. And then not only were they getting rid of the elephant in the circus, they're getting rid of the clown.
Yeah,
at least in the Ringling Circus.
Kind of, yeah. Clowns are now kind of, even the mascot Ronald McDonald is gone. Because of the image of a clown has kind of been tainted thanks to the 2016 clown sighting situation. And I think they realize, it's just not working anymore. People are freaked out by clowns, so let's remove it, And I didn't know the Ringlings were going to get rid of it, but I can imagine it's along the same vein. Because Cirque du Soleil, for example, the French-Canadian version, of circuses, they are so heavily occulted. The Circus of the Sun, you know what I mean, and they've got so much symbolism throughout their rituals, I'll call them. And the clowns they have are not clowns. It's like every single creature that comes out is like a human animal hybrid monster of some kind, and they have these aesthetics you would equate to the Nephilim, definitely. But you wouldn't call them clowns exactly. A clown is a very specific thing, They were the purpose originally. Not only was it obviously a demonic thing, but when it came to the traveling circus, the usefulness was they distract the crowd while they change the scene in the background. And maybe they found more streamlined versions today, I imagine, to not have to do with that anymore. Right. So maybe that's why they get rid of it as well. But what have you got for me? Tell me.
I've got another interesting rabbit hole, and we're going to get back to the Shriners. Don't worry. Real quick, we got a tip here. $9.99 from Vehicular Alchemy. Interesting channel name. How do from Hotlanta, friends. Been watching this clown stuff from Conspiracies R Us and love how you influenced his videos. Can you please tell me why my kids watch movies that all have a Bob or B.O.B. character? That question for you.
Yeah, so Conspiracy R Us, there was a period of time in 2018 where I had to leave YouTube because my work found my YouTube channel and threatened to fire me if I didn't stop making conspiracy videos. And in a moment of weakness, not my proudest moment, I capitulated and I took the channel down and hid all my videos. And for 5 years, I was out of the game. In that 5-year period, in the last 2 years, after 3 years, Conspiracy R Us kind of revived all my work. I'd already made 17 episodes on the clown thing, and he said it was me he got it all from, and he was like saying, there's this guy that used to be around, he's not here anymore, but he made this series about clowns, and he kind of just reiterated all my work to his own audience and kind of revived the topic. And I was like, wow, people like it, So I kind of made all my videos visible again after he did that. And 2 years later, I quit that job, come back to YouTube. I do this full time now, and I've just took the leap of faith. And I'm not a supermarket manager. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I had to be true to myself. And he went off on a tangent of my work after a few episodes, and he discovered something about Bob and this constant reoccurrence of the character all throughout media. And it's always linked to a smiling, grinning face man clown of some kind, and he's kind of just weaved all throughout the media. But to be honest, that's his shtick. That's just something he came up with based off of my work. His channel will have a lot more to say about that than I do. I don't even talk about the Bob thing in my work. I've just focused solely on the cultural aesthetics and the history of the clown and things like this. The conspiracy ROs, like I said, he took my work, reiterated it, and then went off on this own Bob thing, which is, again, it's his own thing. You could go on into looking at it. It is fascinating, but it's not something I talk about, so I can't really answer that question. I wouldn't do it justice. Let's put it that way.
Understood.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for clarifying.
I thanked him in the book as well. He has a special thank you in the back for that reason, because if it wasn't for him reviving it, I probably never would have come back. It inspired me to say, yes, I do want to come back and finish what I started, type of thing. You know what I mean? I'm not going to let the bastards bring me down. So yeah, it's I think I need to talk with him, to be honest, but I think he's quite a private guy. I don't think he does like interviews and stuff, but yeah.
Right. We got Ryan Paravecchio with becoming a member. Appreciate that, man.
Cool.
Vehicular Alchemy with another $4.99. Isn't the demon different than a daemon? If so, which are the clowns representing? Paul, you want to take a swing at it?
I'm not aware of a difference, to be honest. So it's just semantics at the end of the day.
I'll step in here and say, demon. The word demon did not have as negative of a connotation or interpretation as the farther back you go. I could be wrong on that, but daemon was kind of another way of saying entity, angel, thing, obscure source of consciousness, whether it's in your head or whether it's a deity in the room. For example, I believe Socrates claimed to have a daemon.
Mm-hmm.
And this daemon was almost like a imaginary friend, best friend, but it was also a source of information. He could kind of pose a question to one corner of his mind, and this daemon could provide an answer. And I believe that's the word used when describing that, is daemon, or at least in English.
Okay, I get the idea. I understand the distinction. So
yeah.
if we were going
to daemon also is a word. Angels have been categorized under the category of daemon.
I see.
At one time.
If you want to get specific with a modern understanding of the word demon as a negative, malevolent spirit specifically, then the clowns specifically represent the disembodied spirits of the giants, offspring of fallen angel watchers who mated with women. If you want to get specific about what the clown represents, it's specifically the disembodied spirits of Nephilim. It seems like in spirit form, they look more like jesters, or what we would call a jester. But when they were roamed in physical form, they looked like the Wangina I showed you in that rock formation, or the Rakshasas. They were big, wide, grinning, buck teeth, bulging eyed, white skin, red, flailing haired monsters. You know what I mean? And it's kind of, the clown is just a childish caricature of their features. So if you break down a clown, I mean, everything about a clown is a caricatured amalgam. So the big, wide, red smile is a serpentine feature. Snakes can dislocate their jaws to eat their prey. And they are the offspring of dragons mixing with humans. So I think they would have had very wide maws from the front that looks like a smile. But they weren't really smiling. It's just what happens when you have a big, wide, open mouth, from the front. Lizards look like they're smiling at you when you look at them from the front. But they're not. They just have very big mouths, So I think that's where we get the big, wide clown smile from. The red around it could simply be a lizard with human lips would look pretty freaky. It looked like it had a big red smile. It would look weird because lizards don't have lips traditionally, but symbolically it could represent cannibalism.
Man, white people ain't got no lips, man. Wild men.
The Nephilim
European
did.
Wild men ass.
The Nephilim did anyway, but the thing is, it's like it could be blood. It could be cannibalism because these things ate men and themselves,
I see another question here said, why the red nose? And it makes me think of like brown nose. If you're a brown nose, it's because you're rubbing up in some doo doo.
Have you ever seen a kid eat spaghetti bolagnese? You know,
Right.
it gets evereverywhere, doesn't it? Including the nose, and it's kind of big red grin. It could be like the eating people and entrails and the rest of it. Yeah, it's going to be messy. But there's actually an interesting one. There is a genetic explanation for the red nose. It's actually a very real condition that specifically Caucasian Celtic people suffer from. It's called the curse of the Celts. It's an extreme end stage version of rosacea. It's like if rosacea is just like patchy red splotches, but when it gets extreme and gets in the worst possible outcome you could get from it, it ends up something called a rhinophyma. And it's where the nose gets big and bulbous, and it keeps growing, gets full of pus, and it gets a massive red ball. Your nose turns into a giant red ball. Google it.
Did JP Morgan have that?
Well, it's a white person problem. Any race can get it. Don't get me wrong, but it's more specifically a Caucasian issue. It's called the curse of the Celts for that reason.
Speaking of Caucasian issues, okay, I was talking to JT and I was joking with him, and he kind of beat me to the punch. He was like, "Yeah, the first thing we asked Paul when we met him was, hey man, you got red hair. Is there anything you want to tell us? You know?"
Well, first of all, my hair's gold. If you look at it closely, it's not red. My beard's a bit red, to me. Yeah, but I am Celtic through and through. I'm Northern European through and through, absolutely. And maybe I don't know. I think if there's any Nephilim genetics that made it to the modern day, it'd be so diluted among all of humanity now that it's kind of who hasn't been tainted in some way by this point by something like that. And I think Jesus came to save everybody, no matter what corruption has made its way through humanity, and that's why I think that's why we need to be born again in new bodies as well, where the Christian angle comes into all of this. But no, that aside, this rhinophyma situation, well, the Nephilim were very pale, and I think if you just have that problem genetically of pale skin, lack of melanin, you will develop in the end something like a rhinophyma. And I think the Nephilim probably did have rhinophymas, especially the older they got. The more they developed this big red pussy bulbous nose. And if you just put images in, just rhinophyma images, and you can really see what this looks like. Like I'm not joking, just rhinophyma.
Yeah, are you aware that JP Morgan was dealing with this condition at the end of his life?
I'm not.
That's pretty fitting, right?
You find out there's a old.
He had, because sorry to interrupt, he had the big bulbous nose, and then John D. Rockefeller lost all his hair. You know what I mean? They were both afflicted, and they're both meddling in this.
Yeah. Well, it's been equated to drunkenness. Old men who drink a lot in bars get this, is what people think. It's actually a myth. It has nothing to do with alcohol consumption. Zero to do with it. And people that try to argue with me, it's like, I know this because I have hemochromatosis, which is another predominantly Celtic problem of not being able to process iron. And I don't get rosacea, but it's kind of akin. It's like a similar genetic condition, and it's purely genetic. Okay, the reason this happens is you're going to get it or you're not going to get it based on your genes. That's it. There's nothing you can do to make it worse or better based on alcohol or anything like that. But people have always related it to drunkenness and things like this, and it really has nothing. It really is not related at all. It's a myth. It's an urban legend. It's an urban myth to throw shade at old men. He drank too much. That's why he has a big horrible red nose. It has nothing to do with that. It's a genetic condition through and through.
Whoa. Well, hang on. I'm with you that there's probably genetic markers, associations. But I feel like if you guzzle enough baby blood, you might be likely to awaken those dormant genes.
I'm not laughing at the baby blood. That's horrible. But it's kind of, who knows? It could maybe turn on latent baby, genetic markers. It could perhaps activate those things. But you're either going to get it or you're not. But the only way to cure it is to shave it off with a hot wire and resculpt the nose back into a normal shape. You can't get rid of it. You have to just cut it off, basically. And I think the Nephilim would have had big bulbous red noses because of this pale skin condition. I think they would have developed a real genetic condition like we do, which is just the consequence of having pale skin and a lack of melanin,
Have you heard of kuru?
Yeah, the cannibalistic disease.
Mad human disease. If you eat human, that very may well be responsible for cackling, hysteric behavior that we see in some politicians, especially left leaning politicians, it could be theorized they're showing symptoms of kuru, which is a well-known kind of condition that people who eat human flesh cannibalize. They get this kind of cackly, unpredictable, bobblehead type.
Yeah.
That's how they act. That's how
we
they
all
move.
remember the things we saw during the 2016 election, don't we? I think we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It could be. I mean, at the same time as well, the act of doing those things, what kind of spirit are you letting into your body? Well, if it's a cackling clown demon that went insane from the Nephilim standards, then maybe it's just manifestations of the spirit that's in that person as well coming through, and we call it kuru disease, but maybe it's just literally they've got demons in them, and that's why they're acting this way. They're acting like the thing in them, which are clownish in nature, very irreverent. Demons are irreverent by nature, and like I said, everything about clown aesthetics and features and attitudes are completely demonic through and through, historically speaking and literally speaking. I'm not just making this up. This is the history. Like, it's in the books. This is where it comes from. And like I said, clown features, you got the ruffle around the neck. I mentioned earlier, it's about the exoterically, it's like it's an Elizabethan standard.
Right.
It's whatever.
Another red header.
Well, yeah, but that's another point. But also, it's actually a reptilian feature. There's a lizard in Australia called the frilled lizard that has that. It has this thing, and it's possible the Nephilim also inherited frilled necks, and they had the same thing, and makes them look even more clownish, by our standards. But it's actually a lizard component. It's a reptilian component. The slits down the eyes on a clown, they have to put a black line. Those are predator eyes. Slit pupils are a predator specific trait to hunt, and who's the prey at the end of the day for a clown with slit pupils? It's kind of why to have predator slit pupils, and it's predominantly a reptilian feature, though I think there's one canid that has it and one bird as well, and cats, felines as well can have but it's a predator thing. Prey tend to have horizontal pupils, so they get a broader view of the land, and their eyes are on the side of the head for that reason. Hunters have eyes in the front and often slit pupils to get a narrow view of the horizon and pinpoint the prey. So I think the Nephilim would have inherited that trait as well. So the clowns have incorporated that into their makeup. If it's not that, it's blue eye shadow and a really high, tall brow ridge. When the clown actor closes his eyes, it looks like he has enormous blue eyes. Glowing blue eyes. The Nephilim were said to have glowing blue eyes. There's lots of representations of blue-eyed gods out there, bulging big ones as well while we're at it. So I think it's all just a nod and a wink. The red hair is a distinctly Nephilim feature mentioned throughout many sources, biblical and extra biblical as well. And many representations of the giants have red hair. Not always red. Sometimes it's gold as well. And there are variants. Sometimes it's blue skin, not just white skin. But what we're talking about here are reptilian features and psychedelic features at that. Reptiles are very colourful creatures. Very colourful. The costume of a clown is also very pinstriped, multicolored, polka dot.
Have you seen a Gila monster?
I'm not. No. What's this?
Okay, so a Gila monster. I'll pull it up. A Gila monster is I think one of the only poisonous. I think it's the only poisonous lizard native to the United States. And I think you'll appreciate the color. And what's interesting here, the Gila monster is a poisonous lizard, very psychedelic kind of color to it. And these things are deadly, but they're small, right? Native to the Southwest United States, like Arizona, around there. And what's interesting is, you're familiar with the Ozempic?
The weight loss drug.
Yes. The Ozempic weight loss drug is derived from the toxin of the Gila monster. It literally scorches, it poisons the fat out of your body, right? It eats you from
Yeah.
the inside like a snake bite would, right? Snake bites pretty much eat you from the inside. They unravel your DNA, things like that. Gila monster. People go look this up. We get I just said it. I forgot the name. The drug. Ozempic.
Ozempic, yeah.
We get Ozempic from the venom of the Gila monster. Who would have thought?
No, the lengths we go to for vanity, eh? What a mess. I can believe that. I can believe that, though. And yeah, funnily enough, we have salamanders in the UK, which are far smaller than that have a very similar look to that thing with the underbelly that's the same colors. But the point is, reptilians, amphibians, insects, they're very color. Nature has a very colorful palette, and creatures have, and bright colors are a warning sign, predominantly danger.
You're right.
And clowns are the most colorful creatures around. If you want to define them as a creature, if you saw something like a clown with its skin that color, rather than wearing a costume coming at you with a big wide horrible grin and sharp teeth and bulging eyes, you're in danger. You are the prey. It is a predator. Like, run, do what you can. And I think this is what people were dealing with in an antediluvian age. It was a horrible, horrific, terrifying time to be alive. And I think as time went on, the features got diluted. And I think the Rephaim that were perhaps around more in the time of the Canaanites and Israel, way after the flood, I think they probably had more human elements to them and traits and were a lot smaller than the original OG half dragon, half human hybrids, And I think the Nephilim, the Elio, the children and the children's children of the Nephilim who had diluted and mated with women and humans throughout their own iterations, I think it does eventually get down to we now have a class of humans around today who consider themselves the descendants of angels. So they are the modern day Nephilim, but they look like us with slightly different features, maybe a slightly elongated skull or a slightly weirder grin than the most, or like I said, bigger noses than the rest or something like this, But they tend to be the ones that believe they have special blood, the divine right to rule, given to them by the only time where angels ever mated with humans is when the Nephilim were created. So that must be where they think they get their blood from, unless you're Jesus. Your blood comes straight from God and humanity itself. So it's that type of thing, isn't it? Yeah, interesting.
Can we talk, speaking of elongated skulls, I've often looked at the various hats worn by different, religious leaders and, of course, like the Pope with the fish hat or the bunny ear, right? The bunny ears underneath the hat. This also kind of ties back into the fez. And I'm going to show some pictures of elongated skulls that have been found in Florida since you bring them up. But if we could go back to the Shriners and if you could tell us a little bit more of, why the Shriners are involved with children's hospitals and the circus and
for charity, of course, and to keep the kids happy.
Like right.
So that's the public front, isn't it? Charity and to keep the kids happy. It's mainly a tax haven, to be honest. The whole
also, real quick to your point, charity. That's the great answer because what do all of these billionaire people like to identify as? Philanthropists.
Yeah.
And I've shown on my channel, without a doubt, we can interpret the word philanthropist not just to mean a lover of mankind, but to literally mean man lover. Philo, love, right? Romantic love, affectionate love, and then andro or anthro. And yes, we can interpret that to mean lover of humanity in the broad sense, but you can just as easily interpret that to mean man lover. Take it a step further.
Well,
if you want,
I can. I've got the last section of the chapter on this. Kind of gives you a bit of context to when the shrines got involved in all of this. In terms of the fez, it's a symbol of allegiance to Islam and the Ottoman Empire. In 1033, there was a mass murder of 6,000 Jews in Fez, Morocco, where the hat finds its namesake. So that's kind of what it's a representation of. this seemingly fun-loving and charitable Western organization wearing an item of clothing venerating this particular geographical location and its bloody history seems slightly out of place with the fraternity's official creation narrative. The official creation narrative is that it was some Freemason once went to a party with an Arabic theme and really liked the aesthetics, so started his own club dedicated to fun for it. It's kind of, I don't think so. That ain't gonna fly, you know. So it goes into here, you know, why does a Muslim-themed brotherhood have an obsession with clowns as well? It's odd, isn't it? Like, it doesn't mix jinn. Well, you know. Well, you have the smokeless fire jinn, yeah, and I think they are their version of the Nephilim, and the way they're represented are quite clownish when you look at actual older representations of Islamic demons. Yeah, they're very clownish, polka-dotted and crazy-looking monsters with blue skin and all sorts of things, you know. But again, that's just their version of the Rakshasa demons of India or the Wanjinas of you know, the Kimberley region of Australia or the wild men of Europe. It's kind of the Oni demons of Japan or something, or like they all have their own version of the same creatures, just with a different name and a different geographical history. But it seems like the Shrine Circus was founded in Detroit, Michigan on Woodward Avenue in 1906, so they got quite late into the game. I feel like they became the adopters of the circus tradition, which was traditionally done by Freemasons and the Oddfellows. I feel like as time went on, it was given to the Shriners to kind of take over the circuses of America. And that is pretty much what happened. It travels roughly 120 cities annually in the United States, and a separate unit travels to about 40 in Canada. So the traveling big circus of Shriners is still going today, you know. Downtown Detroit in Wayne County, Michigan, has a historical plaque commemorating the site. It was erected in 1980, and I've got here, it says, in 1907, shrine temples in other cities began sponsoring circuses, and in 1925, the Shriners featured the first three-ring show, originally operating for 1 week. Shrine circuses appear across the nation throughout the year. Clyde Beatty and his wild animals were the main attraction in Detroit from 1925 to 1965. The Nelsons, aerialists and acrobats, and roaming clowns of Michigan are also featured performers during the early years. In the 1980s, annual attendance at shrine circuses exceeded that of any other circus in America. So they had the biggest circuses going from even to the modern day. I think circuses have fallen out of fashion recently, and I think they're struggling to keep the numbers up like they used to. But Shriners just took over all of American circuses in that time period, at the start of the 20th century, and it's not explained anywhere why, just that they did, and they heavily adopted the clown into their fraternal order, and they all have their own clown sect within each one. And again, what is a Muslim-themed fraternity doing? Having Western clowns as a main predominant feature, it doesn't make any sense, you know. And I'm kind of asking these questions because there's more questions than answers to these things. Like, and they're not going to tell you explicitly why they do these things. And I think my research on the Nephilim Clowns can explain a lot, you know, why they would incorporate such a thing, because it represents demons, and who are these people working with. One thing that is interesting is we're talking about the hospitals. There are over 25 shrine hospitals and traveling clinics in the Americas, and regular clown visits are the norm for these facilities. On the surface, it does seem quite noble, doesn't it? The Shriners run hospitals and dress like clowns to bring laughter to sick children, moments of levity to an otherwise bleak existence filled with pain and uncertainty. Who could question such an organization without being considered evil and worthy of ridicule and ostracization? Well, Sandy Frost, author of Vampires of Charity, a deep dive into the shady dealings of these so-called charitable organizations, had this to say about the Shriners' hospitals and circuses. Quote, in 1987, the Washington Monthly published Faith, Hope, and Chicanery. Want to do some good? Ask your favorite charity where it spends its money. And wrote, the Shrine Fraternity, which operates the nation's largest charity, has been misleading the public for years. In 1984, the circuses reaped an estimate profit of $17.5 million. The charity owns records show that the hospital received only 1% of that total. So out of $17.5 million earned by the circuses, 1% of that went towards these hospitals. So they're not doing it to raise money for hospitals either. Like, that's nonsense, you know. Where's the money going? And examining the more shadowy and mysterious Freemasonic group in the next heading can shed some light on these missing millions. Then it goes on to the Royal Order of the Jesters. The money's going towards funding the parties for the Jesters. The money's going towards the rituals, the dark stuff, the horrible stuff, the travel expenses to go and rape young girls in foreign countries and start all sorts of things, and she blows it way out of the water. They have avoided paying any tax on all of this as well. They are tax frauds through and through.
Easy on the R word.
But still, what I'm saying is I can't really talk about the Jesters without losing everything because it's too horrible. The things these men have done have been caught doing publicly. Everything in my book is on public record because they have gone through the courts. They have been done by FBI records I'm talking about here. Okay? Yeah. The actions of these members, who are all Shriners, by the way, as well as orders of the Royal Order of the Jesters, they are basically performing tax fraud on a mass scale, money laundering, and using the money raised by the traveling circus to fund the most heinous of actions. That's basically what's going on there. Yeah.
Even in their Wikipedia, you can see some dirt kind of.
The Wikipedia's been expunged. It's been expunged. I had to use the Wayback Machine. I did some digging to try and find any information at all on the Royal Order of the Jesters. They have gone dark. They have removed their website, everything. They have taken down forum posts of whistleblowers, all sorts of things. They are shutting down as much as they can on this fraternal order. But they can't get rid of the FBI records. They're still there. Yeah. So it's simple. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. And like I said, the Shriners are headquartered in Tampa Bay. And
the Royal Order of the Jesters is in Indianapolis, I believe. That's where their headquarters is.
Are they?
Yeah, they're right in the center.
Good.
Not
far
too
away from here.
Not too far away from Chicago, where what's his name? The clown serial killer, Pogo the Clown. What's his name? John Wayne Gacy resided.
Yes. Okay, that's what I wanted to talk about too. Is let's open up the gopher hole. I like to call them gopher holes because we got gopher wood in Florida, right?
Yeah.
The gopher hole. Promise me you won't write a book about fast food until I do, okay?
No, it's all yours.
Give me a gentleman's agreement on that. Okay.
Sure.
You got to be careful with someone like Paul here. Okay, they're so brilliant. They'll just. I'm just kidding. I know you never. But no. So the fast food connection to all this. Of course, like we touched on at the beginning. You see the clown coming up, not just a McDonald's, right? Jack in the Box, right? Jack in the Box is kind of a clown jester thing too. And like you say, John Wayne Gacy was not only a clown, he was a JC, which is, they're not as Masonic adjacent as some other societies. It's more of a neighborly thing, but the JCs, just like the jesters here, have been caught in wife swapping, prostitution, drug-induced crazed orgies and all this stuff. That's all out in the open. That's Wikipedia level, disclosure, right? There's so much more if you just dig deeper too. And John Wayne Gacy, not only was he a clown in his free time, he was the manager of multiple Kentucky Fried Chickens. Colonel Sanders, the creator of Kentucky Fried Chicken, not only was he a master mason, he was also a Shriner. Mm-hmm. And he was part of the knights of two different knights of this, knights of that. I don't know if it was Malta or Templar or whatever.
They're all members of everything every time.
Exactly.
They can't stop.
You see the red and the white coming up in fast food a ton. Mm-hmm. Templar, KKK. I've got a video that links the KGC. I'll give you a quick rundown, Paul. I did a video about the KGC with no intention of bumping into fast food, right? Because that's kind of like entry level conspiracy theory stuff. It's like, yo, you see the new Taco Bell commercial? Like, whoa, it's right in our face, man, and stuff like that. But we should never think we're like past that stuff, or because here I am right back, digging into fast food and the rabbit holes. After the Civil War, or before the Civil War, the Freemasons in the South wished to distance themselves from the Freemasons in the North. So they became the Knights of the Golden Circle, the KGC. KGC, after the Civil War. By the way, all the Lincoln assassins were members of the KGC. The members of the KGC, they wore a pointy helmet, and they held up a crescent, worshipped a crescent. Lucifer, the morning star, the crescent star. Venus is a crescent in a
yep,
in a telescope, for those who don't know. And they, after the Civil War, had to go underground again and became the KKK. We know this to be true. This is no denying this. There's Hollywood movies about this, National Treasures about this. And the KGC became the KKK. And as you brought up earlier, 3 times 11 is 33. KKK is 11, 11, 11. 3 11s.
Yep.
Well, the KKK, in one of the first big movies ever to really kind of capture people's and motivate them to in terms of politics and society, was a movie called Birth of a Nation, which was a silent KKK movie that glorified the Ku Klux Klan. In that movie, you have kind of the first popularization of the fried chicken stereotype, right? And that's a product of the KKK glorifying movie. From there, the KKK, of course, goes underground again. And after this, we see the fast food industry explode in the Southeast United States. All of them, bar none, of the top fast food chains, all of them are involved in this. And fast food chains, shackles, post slavery Civil War era. What would you do if you were a slaveholder and you could no longer have slaves, and you wanted to make money and you wanted to do this? This is kind of the narrative I've been working with. You'd go to the next available form of slavery, which is either hiring low skilled, no skilled labor, treating them like slaves, but also feeding people food that is equatable to slave food, right? And the fast food chains, kind of the chains of slavery, became the fast food chains. KFC being one of the leading figures in this, driven by Colonel Sanders. Another one was White Castle. Okay. So there's all this to this. But KFC was one of the first and the biggest. John Wayne Gacy goes on to become a manager of multiple KFCs. McDonald's, of course, has Ronald McDonald. We have Jack in the Box. And if you're using the symbolism of the Knights of the Golden Circle and the Order of the Lone Star, every single fast food place either has a golden circle in their emblem, golden corral, golden arches, you name it, or they have a lone star, a lone star. And you see the number 3 and 11 popping up all over the place. And of course, in movies, like just to tie this all together here with a bow, we have movies like Kingsman, The Golden Circle, which kind of quietly discloses, or what would you call this, soft disclosure, manufactured consent. You could even say this is, vampires, you have to invite them in,
Mm-hmm.
right? One of the tenets of black magic is you have to tell someone, or it's most effective when you tell someone what you're doing to them, right? And of course, we see disclosure like this in movies. I'm sure you've gone down deep rabbit holes with Hollywood films and how much they're revealing and stuff like that. Kingsman, the Golden Circle, it's going to tie all this together here. The movie revolves around like the Welsh or British or Scottish Secret Service, right? The Kingsmen. And the first movie was popular. This is the second movie. It's the sequel to the first Kingsman. And in this, the Golden Circle, that's a direct reference to the Knights of the Golden Circle, who also came out of Kentucky, by the way. Kentucky Fried Chicken, Knights of the Golden Circle also come out of Kentucky. KGC, KFC. When KFC brands themselves at the Olympics and stuff, they try and be healthier. So they'll present themselves as KGC on the world stage. Do you guys know this? It's KGC when they go to the Olympics, when they're trying to be healthy. KFC becomes KGC. Go look it up. They have packaging. It's printed all over the place. KFC is the KGC. The Knights of the Golden Circle. Kingsman, this movie's a direct reference. They go to Kentucky, and basically the villain in here is a red-headed, pale-skinned, it's Julianne Moore, who's playing like a Wendy's type figure. She's supposed to be Wendy. What's interesting is the original Wendy was not red-headed. She's more blondish, and her name's not Wendy. It's not even close. Okay, Wendy was a nickname that doesn't match. Her name's Melinda. They call her Wendy. The real Wendy of Wendy's was a concocted kind of mascot, right? It wasn't actually his daughter, based on his daughter, but Nephilimized, right? We could say.
Yeah.
And in this movie, they format the villain after Wendy, and it's not Wendy that most people know. It's the Wendy that you and I are kind of describing, where she runs a fast food. She's a drug cartel kingpin, right? She sells drugs around the world. She is she runs a donut chain. She runs an ice cream place. She runs all the treats and the sweets, and they're also the letter K and Krispy Kreme and all this goes back. Kmart, Kellogg's, all this K being pushed in fast food goes back to the KKK as well. But this movie, we see a red-haired antagonist. She puts human meat in her food and tricks people into eating it. She puts nanotech in her food, tricks people into eating it, and all this stuff. And let's see what else I've written down. But she's essentially Wendy, and she's cannibalizing. She's acting like this. She's also very cackly. She has the kuru. She has the kuru personality, And you guys would be amazed at what they tell in this movie. But that's my 2 cents on the fast food thing. Maybe we'll catch up and talk more fast food next time. We're gonna have to wrap it up here soon.
I feel like you might know a lot more than me on the whole fast food front, to be honest. I am aware that, like you said, there are a lot of mascots within the fast food industry that always go for the red-haired, pale-skinned aesthetic. I mean, even Jack in the Box itself is a very creepy-looking character. A Jack in the Box has always been a devil in a box anyway, so it's always been a Nephilim reference. So even we could even go off that as well. There's a lot to be said for what's truly in the hamburgers and this type of thing. I've heard a lot of people talk about that too, but I couldn't say if that was true or false, so I can either confirm nor deny such a thing, But yeah, it's very suspect. And in terms of John Wayne Gacy, what makes that even more suspect is that he was caught. 2 of his 33 victims, all young boys and young men. 2 of them were trafficked to him. And he was caught being surveilled, talking to 2 men about the product he had trafficked, basically. And they were saying like they're onto us or something like this. And he was saying, be cool, that kind of conversation. You know what I mean? Who was he talking to? It never really gets revealed in this type of thing. But you also discover that the Royal Order of the Jesters are heavily involved in human trafficking. They've been caught doing it, and trafficking prostitutes and all sorts of things. So when you realize he dressed like a clown, was a heavy member of the fraternal lodges in his region, he had a special secret service pin, he was very close with senators of the sorts, he was very active in his community, leading areas, the lighting as well, he ran KFCs and all this type of stuff, which you give me a new connection there, which is clearly very sus in his own right. He was actually only about a 30-minute drive from his local Royal Order of the Jesters lodge. 33 flavors, look at that, what a joke. And he was only about maybe 2-hour drive away from the Royal Order of Jesters headquarters in Indianapolis. So you have to wonder, like, I'm drawing connections here and I'm speculating, but he only started dressing like a clown halfway through his killing spree. And perhaps he realized there's people who can help me with this, and maybe he learned what the clown really is as time went on, and adopted it into his own life. You know, it's that kind of thing. And like, if you're in the know, if you're in the club, maybe you become privy to such knowledge. You know, like what a clown costume really is. And when I said I've just stumbled into uncovering it, but it's not new. This is not new. This has been going on for a long time, like you've been discussing there, you know. The pale skin, red haired thing. I'm not talking ginger here either. I'm not talking slightly pale, reddy, peachy skin with some orange tones in your hair. I'm talking blood red hair and porcelain white skin. Not human. You don't see humans that look like that. It doesn't exist. Okay,
like Queen Elizabeth, first almost.
Well, she had Venetian ceruse all over her face, which was a lead-based face paint.
Probably killed her too, right?
We think so, yeah. Her face was falling apart, so she kept using more to cover it up, which made it fall apart even more. It was becoming an absolute mess. But she had the giant, enormous reptilian frill around her neck, you know what I mean? And the big, puffy, elongated skull-looking red hair. And, you know, clowns often wear the skull cap, which makes their head look like a pin, like a cone head, you know? And it's kind of they're accentuating the features to look more Nephilim-esque, absolutely. Like I said, you don't see real people with red hair like that. It doesn't exist, you know, but the Nephilim did. They were not natural. They weren't human in any respect. So when you see someone like a Wendy's character, it's kind of like, you don't get people with hair like that naturally. That doesn't actually, it's not a thing. Blood red hair, you know. It's an over-exaggeration. It's a symbol for something. And it's a scary one. Like I said, we've covered a lot today. We've only just scratched the surface, really. Like I said, I've got hours of content on my channel, all in video format with visuals to back it all up if you want to go there instead. We haven't even talked about modern media, the push of the clown all throughout the past 10 years onto us as well. And my latest episode was about that, the last one I made. But there's so much about the cultures all over the earth we could have gone into. There's a lot to cover here. The second book I'm writing is going to cover all the cultures and the media stuff. The first book here, which you can get on Amazon, is the history, where the Nephilim come from, how we can know what they look like based on what sources we have, from old text to new text, extra biblical and outside sources that aren't biblical as well, other historical records and other cultures' histories as well. So that's the first book is called Volume 1, The History, and the second book will be called The Now. So that's coming hopefully within a year's time. So that's what I'm doing. That's where your audience can find more information on this, because like I said, it's a deep rabbit hole. And so many tangents you can go on with this. Many tangents. It's unbelievable.
Well, Paul, let's watch a short little clip.
Sure.
Then I'll pull up your book, and then we'll get you out of here. Okay. I know it's late there, right?
Well, it's almost midnight, but I'm used to this. This is what I normally do on a Sunday anyway. So don't worry about it. It's cool.
Awesome. This is a segment from my Ancient Elephants of Atlantis video. It's catching up with, I think his name's Larry Feld. I think he's the new owner of the Ringling Circus.
Mm-hmm.
And he has been accused many times, the Ringling Circus and him have been accused of terrorizing, not just people, the elephants, that they treat these elephants worse than cattle, worse than a cockroach. I mean, they stab these things, they electrocute them to make them do their bidding. And terrible situation. But he was under a lot of pressure, like we were saying, and now they're revamping the circus. And there's a funny little tidbit at the end here that I'd like us to react to.
Elephants are killed for ivory and its tusks, putting the entire population at risk.
The legal market will continue the poaching.
Also, they've been accused of partaking in the illegal ivory trade, like harvesting circus elephant. It's terrible. It's
sad.
Julie,
Greatest show on earth is coming back to the big top. Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey have reimagined the iconic franchise, including the live show, products, and behind-the-scenes documentary. Feld Entertainment says the show will engage the audience to make each performance a unique experience. The tour will visit more than 50 cities in North America, starting in the fall of 2023. Auditions are already underway for the next cast of Circus Sensations.
You won't be seeing elephants, tigers, or lions, but after a 7-year break, Feld Entertainment is back and betting on a reimagined version of the Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus. Joining us right now is Kenneth Feld. He's the CEO of Feld Entertainment. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So I grew up on the circus. I did, and it's politically incorrect to say, but I enjoyed the elephants a lot as a child. I just want to say it out loud and proud. So what are you doing now?
What we're doing, we've relaunched Ringling Brothers Barnum Bailey, and we are opening in Brooklyn tonight at Barclays. And the show is completely different. It is reimagined for audiences today and tomorrow.
What does that mean?
It means that the scale is larger than ever. And when you go in and you look at what we have, it's different. So you're not going to go in and think a preconceived idea. It's so different. And it's really like the ultimate playground. And we have performers, 75 performers from 18 different countries. And what they're doing is extraordinary. And what we want is people in today's world to have simple fun. And that's what this is. We're non-lingual. Everybody can enjoy it. And it creates a conversation on the way home. And that's the beauty of it. And the new Ringling, the pace is great. The acts are extraordinary, the performers. And it's something that is inspiring, I think, for young kids, that people can do all this stuff. And it's amazing, and it gives them hope.
So this is more, how much more of this is now, this is more human stunt-based than anything else? Is that a fair thing to say? You probably don't like that to say
but
that.
It's more than just that. It's the sense of humor. It's the feeling. It's an excitement, and it doesn't exist anyplace else. That's the key. That it's unique. When you go into Ringling, you can't. There's nothing else like it, and that's true today in this reimagined thing. And the way we've done it, people are excited.
What else they own?
Since the beginning of the year, we've played not just with Ringling, but all of our stuff. People want to go out between 500,000 and over 1 million people every single week since the beginning of the year.
Clowns are okay, aren't they?
Humor is good.
No clowns?
No, they are comedians. They are funny people.
Oh my God, are clowns
things.
Canceled? Why did clowns get canceled? Because of John Wayne Gacy?
Because they don't want to scare people with white, crazy makeup and red noses and things like that.
People with white, crazy makeup and red noses and things like that. People with white, crazy makeup and
red noses and things like that.
So, and then I was thinking you could do dogs. Couldn't you? Dogs are happy to be doing those tricks. Or
we do have a dog. We have a robotic dog.
Well, they just
elephants in Florida. Yeah, that's the clip. It brings up a good point. I had a rabbi in here earlier. I told him what I was doing this morning, and I told him what I was doing after. I told him I had JT on earlier. We were talking about Christianity a little. He thought that was cool. I told him I was having you on later, and I told him kind of the premise of your research. And I was like, what do you know about clowns, man? And he shared about how there are clowns in Judaism. It's not a well-known thing, but have you came across this? The Badchin?
Yeah, it rings a bell. Yeah, I've had people tell me about this. Yeah, it's a sacred clown. Yeah.
So not only, going back to the red hair real quick, clowns have often, believe it or not, been associated with Jewish people historically. Red hair would be one of those things. A prominent nose, let's just say, is another theme. But also having a court jester, having a court Jew. The Tsar Peter, is this correct, had a famous court clown who was Jewish. And we see people like Jesus, it said he may have had red hair. It's theorized. Muhammad, it's definitely theorized he had red hair. You can go on, right? Aristotle talks about the mischief associated with the deviousness associated with red hair. And there's also an element of Judaism to the clown kind of archetype a little bit. Have you came across that at all? And of course, Jews are known for humor and comedy and things like that. Have you came across that at all?
I like I said, people have shared this with me. I clearly don't know much about it as you do either. My work predominantly hasn't really focused on modern iterations or the more human elements of where the clown comes from. I think the clown costume is strictly based on Nephilim features, which were not human at all. That isn't to say there hasn't been future, more modern iterations of the spirit behind clowning kind of evolving into something that we see today, which can be related to certain cultures, absolutely. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with being a comedian or a funny man. That doesn't necessarily mean Nephilim or anything, Of
course.
So that's what I would say. Mine's more of an anthropological study on costume, ritual, and performance, I suppose, rather than cultures or specific people or humans. I tend to avoid the idea that there are humans out there that aren't really human. Kind of type of discussion, because I don't feel like it bears much good fruit in the long run. And if you want to start playing that game, it's everyone ends up eating each other alive. So I try not to go that way, because every culture thinks another culture isn't human at the end of the day.
Well, you heard it from Paul, guys. Clowns are kosher. Just kidding. The Three Stooges were Jewish. It's worth noting, and for a lot of Americans, that's kind of.
There's no doubt that those particular people own all of the media industry and entertainment industry. That is undisputed. Yeah. And it's not, I don't think they're even that funny, to be honest. I don't think it's because they're funny. It's because they know the power behind entertainment and the usefulness it has in controlling people and influencing opinion and thoughts in every facet of everyone's life. It used to, memes are taking over though. I would say it used to be TV, and now I'm saying it's meme culture that's dictating the zeitgeist. Things have changed, and I guess they'll have to adapt in some way to find a new way to regain that power they're losing drastically right now. And yeah, it's interesting times.
Well, Paul, it's been great having you today. We're going to pull up your book here. So much gravy ladled. I mean, this is and honestly, you won me over, man. The first time I ever heard about the Nephilim and clowns thing. This was 2 years ago or so. I brushed it off, or didn't think it's as deep of a rabbit hole as it was. Now looking into it, of course, on my end, and talking to you, you won me over. I mean, I'm convinced about most of this. Of course, the general premise, and I'm very eager to pick up a copy of your book too. I know it's always hard to gather all your thoughts and get everything you want to say out at once, but a book, oftentimes makes that easier. And so I'm very excited to get into your book. And you did a great job. You're very coherent, very, you don't lose your train of thought.
I've done this 1,000 times now.
You can go.
Everything you've heard me say, I was saying a lot a year ago on the podcast circuit. So I've kind of mastered it through practice. That's all it really is. And to be honest, it's been over a year since I've really done a Nephilim Clown podcast. So I was worried I was going to be out of practice, but I think this was a good warm-up for the future, to be honest. So thanks for having me to do this again. I appreciate it. Like I said, the book is doing very well. 134 ratings, pushing 5 stars, very few complaints. I've had the odd little person complaining because there wasn't any pictures in the book, but I'm not here to capitulate to people's inability to read without pictures. It is a scholarly work. It's fully referenced all throughout. There's 330, I don't know how many references, 356 references or something like that. It's a 300 and like a 290-page book, but if you include all the references, it goes up to a good like 300 and something. It's I worked hard on this because I understand the premise is, what is it, 383 references in this one book alone, and like I said, the second one's coming, and I'm not just making this up, is what I'm trying to say. Like, this is because I know what it sounds like when you hear it. The Nephilim, I know what it sounds like. It's not as crazy as it sounds. It's actually very much rooted in biblical history, philosophy, reality itself, and what we can observe and can be proven, not just wild speculation. And I didn't know it would be this deep, to be honest, when I first started. I didn't, like, you heard the story at the start. I just rolled with it, and the connections just kept coming. So if you go in the playlist section of my channel, there's a Nephilim Look Like Clowns playlist you can go to. It's at the end there. Look, and it opens up with a 15-minute kind of summary, but it goes from 1 to 43 episodes there, and then some extras in between, which kind of explain clearly everything from start to finish. So you can follow my entire thought process from 9 years ago, and how I got to where I am today. It's not just come out of nowhere. But like I said, I cover a lot of things on my channel. As you can see, a lot of subjects on there. I have my own podcast, the Truth Therapy Sessions, as well, and it's I've been doing this for over a decade, so it's kind of I like to branch out into many topics. Let's put it that way.
Well, Paul, man, we're gonna have to have you back on soon.
Sure.
If you can find some time for us, we'll pick another niche of this topic and dive in.
Sure,
guys, go get a copy of his book. Go subscribe, check him out at Understanding Conspiracy on YouTube. And are you live right now? It looks like you're live.
Yeah, I'm streaming this. So
OBS?
Through OBS screen capture. Yeah, so they're getting everything you shared. They're getting the exact same thing. What have we got? 555? I've not watched. I've not looked. Yeah, cool. That's good. That's good. That's good numbers. That's really good numbers for a live show, to be honest. I don't know what have you got over there on your side?
We've got 716 on my side. We were almost up to 800 real quick about 10 minutes ago.
Excellent.
But that's a great turnout on my end too.
It's good. Yeah. We'll definitely do it again. Like I said, just a Wednesday or a Sunday where you can do it at this time again. That would be perfect for me. Yeah.
If you ever want me to come on and do some rambling, I'd be happy to do that too. You seem
like a wealth of knowledge to me. You seem like you know a lot about a lot of things. So yeah, I'll have to get you on for a Truth or Therapy session episode. You can be a guest, and we'll you can tell your story to me.
Well, I'd love to tell more about the fast food, because I think you can do a lot with that.
Sure.
I think it'll be useful for you too. Guys, you know where to find him now. Paul, world-class guest over here. Guys, if you got your own shows, hit up Paul, man. I mean, great gravy right here. Everyone go have a good night. This is our second show today. Go watch the earlier one I did with Paul's friend, JT, earlier today. And I'll see you guys next time, probably Wednesday or Thursday. Adios. Everyone have a good night. Peace. Off. We're backstage.
Are you tired of the same old conversations? Do you often find yourself struggling to know what to say? Are you over discussing the news, sports ball, or the weather? It's time to put boring discussions behind you by leaving a copy of the Nephilim Look Like Clowns on your coffee table, your toilet, your local library, mother's car, boss's office desk, or that person you really liked bed instead.
What the hell is this?
Oh, that? Why, it's just a book about how the modern costume of a clown is a caricature of ancient giants and modern demons.
Stay away from my children.
This is a conversation you can't wait to have. My family used to think I was crazy, but thanks to the Nephilim Look Like Clowns, they know I'm crazy. The Nephilim Looks Like Clowns. It's no laughing matter.